Should be good. So it should be good.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, is it all good?
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I just saw the numbers at the top. I'm
like babe, don't touch it.
Like,
You turn the fucking video off. Colin is gonna freak the fuck out when we're done.
And like a red, white, and blue phoenix rising from the ashes of political bipartisanship, we are back to Salt of the Streets podcast. Today is...
I'm sorry. For some reason, I felt like there was more than that. This is Sunday, December 9th, 12/16, episode 43.
Did you miss that last time?
The last 2 fucking weeks. Bless you. I forgot that.
It's hilarious because I didn't even notice that.
Yeah.
So
only as I'm listening to it or like watching the video and I'm like, God fucking damn it. And Rebecca, okay, you go. And then I go. Okay.
So before Don rips into Rebecca, welcome back everybody to the Salt the Streets podcast, your one and only source for social and political commentary on weekly news, pop culture, and sports, built from the ground up for people like you and me, the everyday normal person. Join us as we discuss life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness while we drink beer and continue our endless efforts to bridge the gap between people and information. Coming up on this week's show, as always, we're your hosts. I'm Colin.
I'm Donovan.
And coming up on this week's show, we're going to talk about the CIA Director Gina Haspel's closed-door session with Senate committee leaderships.
Hella closed.
On the Khashoggi incident.
Khashoggi?
Which we talked about last week. And then we're going to be taking a longer look back on the life and legacy of George Herbert Walker Bush, 41st President of the United States, who died just before the show last week.
Not going to be exactly what you would think, but it's going to be an interesting fucking conversation.
It'll be a very interesting, a very salt of the streets level conversation.
Yes.
And then we'll probably talk about, Dawn had an excellent blog post this week, and I really want to talk about that.
About telling the truth.
And then we got, we both got grab bags, and we'll just see where the rest of the day takes us.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there was something I wanted to talk about before we went into the show.
Yep.
Funniest thing happened to me on the way over here today. I went and I was getting gas right down from my house, and I'm just standing there pumping. I did notice that the gas prices were below $3 a gallon. I was like, what's going on? Okay, whatever. That's cool. I'll take it.
Yeah.
No questions asked. And this guy pulled up on the opposite side of the pump to me. He starts filling up. And he goes, wow. He kind of like looks over the, the gas pump thing at me. He's like, wow, they're just giving away gas over here, aren't they?
What?
I was like, yeah, man, sure. And he's like, yeah, over in Seattle, it's like 60, 70 cents more expensive. I'm like, yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
And he goes, well, just between you and me, I think it's all Trump's fault. And I was like, okay, all right, man. Sure.
This guy's just offering all this to you? He's
just going at it.
People do this.
I was just like, dude, first of all, this is neither the time nor the place, brother. It's pouring down rain. It's cold outside. I'm getting gas, and I'm a total stranger, and I don't want to ruin your life by just blowing up your spot.
Yeah,
but
I'm telling you that Trump loves the Saudis and that you're a fucking idiot.
Yeah. And I was like, but you're complaining about gas prices in Seattle and then trying to blame it on Trump. None of that makes sense.
That's pretty bad
whatsoever.
Yeah.
Seattle's about the most anti-Trump place in the world, other than maybe San Francisco.
Yeah.
But I just thought that was too funny, man.
People, like I said, I love when people will do that. Like, they're just so willing to, I don't know, tell you shit that's none of your business. Just tell you, this one time I went to fucking Arby's, and then I'm going to get into Rebecca because, ooh, Rebecca.
I'm excited.
Went to Arby's, and I was trying to order some shit, and this woman behind the counter, I don't remember why she started telling me about this. Probably for no reason at all. And
probably just like the gas station guy.
Starts talking about not spending enough time with her boyfriend, and that she wants to spend more time with her boyfriend, and that he has like weird friends that she doesn't like, and then starts telling me about her boyfriend's friends and like the problem that she has with like this one particular friend's girlfriend and like all this stuff. I'm like, I don't care about this. Like, not only do I not care, right? This has nothing to do with me. Why are you telling me about this?
I'm at Arby's, man.
Give me my change or my cups and let me get the fuck out of here. Like, why is this happening? It's so weird when people do that. So Rebecca, okay?
Coming at you hot, man.
Rebecca
come for you.
I tweeted earlier this week that I was frustrated that I had missed saying the number episode on the last 2 podcasts.
Okay.
Right? So Rebecca, in all of her constantly watching social media for anything that anybody says about anything, asked me about it later that day. She's like, so why are you so frustrated that you forgot to say the episode? I'm like, well, because it's something that I do every time. Like, it's part of like my responsibility in the intro. Like, that's part of my thing. She's like, well, but people already know what episode it is if they're listening to it. Like, they could just read like the title. So I'm like,
damn it, Rebecca, that's not the point.
That's why I'm like, that's not the point. I'm like, that is not the point. Like, the point is, I don't know if we fuck something up or whatever. It's a double check. Don't ask me, because I don't know. That's just part of what I've been doing for fucking 45 weeks almost now. I'm going to continue to do it. Like, it doesn't matter. Let me be frustrated that I forgot, because I'm supposed to be doing it. So,
well, I mean, apparently in Rebecca's defense, you've only been doing it for about 43 or 41 weeks now. So,
well, and then I told her she was stupid, and she didn't like that very much. And she will do this thing where she will close curtains that don't exist in her cubicle. Because she has made the argument before that she should have curtains that she can close on people when she doesn't want to talk to them anymore. And so she'll just like turn around and be like, shh. You know what I'm saying? I'm like,
dude, at the company Christmas party, you should get her one of those, those little extendo like bath rods for like $10 at Walmart and a cheap little set of window curtains. Be like, here you go. Funny. Merry Christmas.
I'll pitch that to Barbara, because Barbara is more apt to do it than I am.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
So anyway, follow us on social medias.
This new relaxed intro thing is getting good. Yeah.
You can find everything that we do on saltofthestreets.com. Our episodes, everything goes on SoundCloud, but it all comes out everywhere that you can find a podcast. We have an Instagram for Salt of the Streets. We have a Facebook for Salt of the Streets. YouTube at Salt of the Streets. Like I said, everything at saltofthestreets.com. We have our own personal social medias. I am Salt of the Street on Twitter and alpaca_Donovan on Instagram.
And I'm the Big Bird Offies, or I should probably say it normally, Big Bird Offie on both Instagram and Twitter.
And
false advertisement.
And I'm pretty sure that's all the social medias there. The episodes come out, like I said, they come out on Monday. The pre-shows come out on Tuesday. There's a live one that we do before the podcast every week, but they come out on YouTube on Tuesday. The full episodes come out on Wednesday. The blog posts come out on Thursday. Said in the pre-show, we're going to start doing an audio version of the blog post also. So we're going to take our written blog post. Colin and I are going to read them respectively, our own, not each other's. And then we'll probably talk about it for a couple minutes. So it'll be like a 5 or 6 minute podcast episode that we're going to put out on Thursdays to accompany the blog post.
Word.
And it's going to be sweet.
And keep it on the same feed so it's easy to find?
Yes. Yep. It'll just show up right in your podcast app like the other one does every week. You won't have to look for it or anything, but it'll also be on SoundCloud, on everywhere. It'll be sick nasty. So here we are. We're going to talk about, we talked about in the pre-show, we are going to go over the CIA briefing that happened. Gina Haspel, she talked to a bunch of Senate leaders.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to talk about that.
Essentially the same committee leaders and members from last week's committee hearing with Mike Pompeo, Secretary of State, and Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis.
Yes.
But because I think they're going to come back up in this conversation as well.
Pompeo and Mattis?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Definitely.
And so we're going to talk about that. We are going to take a little bit deeper look into Bush Sr., Mr. H.W., and we're going to go over some high points and low points in his political career and draw some ties and do a little bit of dot connecting. And all that.
Connecting.
And then we are going to do some grab bag stuff. We are going to do a little bit. We're going to talk about my blog post last week that is about telling the truth. So the rule number 8 is tell the truth or at least don't lie. So we're going to talk about that. And then what did I say? Sports? Fucking pop culture. That's what I was looking for. Pop culture. Then
there you go.
Fuck out of here.
Sounds good to me.
That's it.
So
you want to start with the CIA?
Yeah, let's hit it.
All right, Miss Haspel.
Ms. Haspel. She acquiesced to the request of the Senate leadership And indeed, right?
Wow.
Because if you listened to the show last week, you will remember that Senate leadership was highly upset that the CIA director herself, Gina Haspel, did not make it to that hearing.
Yeah, so it was the Armed Services, Foreign Relations, and the Appropriations, and then the Intelligence Committees.
Okay.
And then also some other leaders throughout the Senate.
Yeah. It's kind of whoever's got enough BDE to get in the door there. You know what I'm talking about when I say BDE. Maybe we'll talk about that later. Let's leave it a mystery for now.
I do have Ariana Grande stuck in my head right now. So.
Oh, is that an Ariana Grande reference? BDE?
What?
Hey, man, I heard it from a 69-year-old man.
Okay, so we're going to talk about it right now.
Let's do it.
Yeah, that is an Ariana Grande thing because she was dating, what's his name, Pete Davidson.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow it came out that he had a huge dick.
He's got BDE.
He's got a huge dick, yeah. And what she tweeted about big dick energy, that's she tweeted about big dick energy.
Okay.
And so then that got taken and done whatever with it.
And how long ago was this?
Months ago. Months and months ago.
I'm going to have to trace this back. Is this... Do we think this
Kanye
is the true
West
origin?
too, and that's what made it really big. Was he said something about? Oh no, he said drag energy. That's what. Yeah,
dragon energy.
Yeah,
I am dragon energy.
Yeah. So yeah, that's an Ariana Grande thing, the big dick energy, because apparently Pete Davidson is a huge hog.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah,
he's a goofy looking dude, so he's got to have something going for him.
We watched one of her videos today. Thank You Next. That's a good song if you haven't listened to it. And it's like all these. It's themed for all these different movies. Mean Girls. And Bring It On and Legally Blonde and stuff. And you ever seen the movie Mean Girls?
No.
Okay, so you should watch it because I love the movie Mean Girls.
I think we've had this discussion before.
It's really funny. They have a burn book where they put pictures of people in there and they write terrible things about them.
Ooh.
And there's a picture of Pete Davidson and underneath it says huge and like it's got a big dick. So that's where big dick energy came from. BDE. Anyway,
yeah. So all these BDE senators, finally got together like they wanted to with Gina Haspel to go over essentially the murder of Jamal Khashoggi.
Yes,
and because she apparently is the only senior member of the administration to have actually heard the audio of the killing
or seen the video. Has she seen the video?
I don't know.
I think she's seen the
probably.
Video too.
I would assume if she's heard the audio,
I would bet one of my nuts that she's seen the video.
Probably. It's CIA, man.
That's how confident I feel.
Yeah. And so, that was the big thing last week when they had Pompeo and Madison, that they all just essentially got briefed. They seemingly had read most of the brief from the CIA, but again, just, we talked about last week. They just tiptoed around the use of that word. There was no smoking gun. There was no definitive evidence, something like that.
Well, and they also just continued to talk about how important the war in Yemen was.
Yeah.
And how they needed to continue to stay involved in the war in Yemen. And that's what they talked about, is not about Jamal Khashoggi like they were there for. They continue to talk about the war in Yemen. And
it's like, well, I don't want to talk about that.
Because of this. And it's important we do because of that. So, we need to continue oversight there and all this.
Well, I will say,
what they're there for.
In their defense, that hearing was supposed to be on the resolution of the United States pulling military support out of the war in Yemen. But that is directly tied to the murder of Jamal Khashoggi.
Absolutely.
And so they were wrong to tiptoe around that, or I wouldn't even say tiptoe, just blatantly disregard that and focus on the other side of it. But the two are integrally tied together, and I think to just push it off like they did is just a huge disservice.
Yeah.
But that's okay, because we finally got Gina Haspel in this week. And of course, this was closed door session, and so we don't really have anything of what was actually said inside there,
just reporting on what's been leaked from there, and then conversations that the senators had afterwards, because there were heard a lot of sound clips from what am I trying to say, Lindsey Graham.
I love the new Lindsey Graham.
Yeah, and there was a couple other people that said a lot of stuff.
Yes, Lindsey Graham, Bob Corker.
Yes,
he's another big voice. Dick Durbin's been a big voice in the whole thing. But yeah, they were all very, very adamantly, pointing their fingers at, Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, as effectively being the orchestrator and the controller of the whole situation.
Absolutely. Lindsey Graham even said, there isn't a smoking gun, there's a smoking saw, right?
Yeah.
Which is in reference because he was chopped up. Jamal Khashoggi was murdered and then cut up with a hacksaw. And that was one of the early reportings, was that the luggage for the murder team had a hacksaw in it. And it was still, it had a bone saw in it, and it was still just let through.
Man, that would have never happened if they tried to bring that through TSA.
Yeah. TSA be all over that shit.
Yeah, sure. I got a problem with TSA.
Dude, TSA.
So many. Yeah. Anyways, that's a... But...
So they... Listen, they had the... Listen
here.
I didn't really mean to say that. I just kind of slipped out.
Just happens.
I know. That's where I'm at today, I guess. I didn't mean to sound Canadian. I didn't mean to say, listen. I know shit's just happening.
I really hope I got that Canadian slip up on Mike.
I think.
God, I hope so.
So the problem with this, right? One of the problems with this, because there's a lot of problems with this. One of the big problems is that the information, it seems that the information that senators received in the meeting or the briefing with Gina Haspel vastly differs from the information that was given to them by Mike Pompeo. Because Mike Pompeo, like you said there was no smoking gun. There is no, there's no evidence that directly ties them. There's no whatever. Which not only neglected to acknowledge the fact that the CIA had recognized and acknowledged that there's no way it could have happened without Jamal Khashoggi. But then Gene Haspel comes in the next week and is like, listen, there's no doubt about it. He had to be involved in it.
Yeah.
And so it underlines a fundamental difference in the perception and the focus between the White House and the intelligence communities, right? And this is something that we've seen numerous times before when it comes to all the times that we talked about when the president has not backed up the CIA and its conclusions, any of the intelligence communities, especially like we talked about with Russia, when they all collectively agreed that Russia had in fact interfered with the election. The president still says, Putin said that he didn't do it, so I'm just going to keep buying that he didn't do it.
Yeah.
It draws another underline under the White House doesn't care about the same shit that the intelligence communities do, which is a problem.
And it's problem. Like you said that
it scares me,
I mean, it's not even that they don't back it up. I would go farther and say that, in most cases, they start to directly contradict the entire intelligence community.
That type of shit. It goes to show, like I said, that the focus in the White House is on money.
Yes.
And it's on power in the Middle East, not about... One of the things I really enjoyed, I think it was Lindsey Graham that said it, was that it doesn't show what America is. That we've always had this kind of air about us that we're that's not even a good way to put it. It's always been a point of pride in America that we're going to stand up for what's right. And that's why we have our fucking nose in every corner of the world, is because always under the guide of, we need to be involved in this. Let America handle this. Let us show you the way that this should be done because we know what's right. And now that we're faced with an obvious right and wrong, someone being murdered in cold blood, we're going to turn our face away from that. That's fucking crazy.
By the state of a foreign country.
Yes. And our president is willing to turn his back on that because his business dealings is more important than that. And I think
by his, you mean the nation's business dealings?
Not his personal idea.
But that's the way he sees it, though, because I think that's good. He sees all these trade deals. With the trade war with China, which I can't wait to talk about later. The rewriting of NAFTA and putting his own stamp on it with the USMCA. All these different trade agreements. These are his business deals.
Absolutely.
And there's no difference between those and what's happening in Saudi Arabia.
And I think that's a really good point because we've also talked about this before. When he takes the TPP and he rebrands it as the USMCA, right? That's what that was.
NAFTA.
The NAFTA. Sorry. Yeah. So he takes
TPP.
NAFTA,
he just took apart and then decided to do a la carte trade deals.
Well, there's so much I mixed them up. So
it is hard because they all.
So he took NAFTA and added a little bit of stuff to it, having to do with you have to have more parts in a car for it to be able to be tariff exempt, for America. I mean, tiny things, the dairy for Canada.
And they're still working on most of it, too.
Exactly. It's not even been finalized through, but that's not even the point, right? He takes things that already exist, rebrands them so that they can be his. It can be a Trump thing. You know, we've talked about that so many times before.
Because that's what he has always done.
He has taken his name and he has sold the name to make money off of it.
Yep.
That's what his whole business has been about.
He's a brand marketer.
Fucking Trump steaks, Trump fucking everything.
Trump steaks.
I'm just going to slap my name on it because it'll add $30 to the value, and let's do it.
You know, his Trump steak thing was only a massive failure because he didn't market it with Trump ketchup. Because that's the way he eats his steaks.
Gross.
That's all I'm saying.
With ketchup? That's gross.
Yeah, man. He wants an overdone steak with ketchup on it. That's his classy way to eat a steak.
That's disgusting.
But it makes sense for somebody like him. But anyways, to go back to this, I think we mentioned earlier how Mike Pompeo and Jim Mattis they're right back in this situation again, because now that they essentially had, the Senate got the word directly from the horse's mouth in this case, from the CIA director herself.
Yes.
And they have all come to the conclusion. I mean, Bob Corker even came out and said it in his interviews after the fact. He said, if this was a court of law in the United States of America, a jury would take about 30 seconds to turn around and deliver a guilty verdict that this happened. There's enough evidence there to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he did this. And he was integrally involved to the point where if he wasn't involved, it would not have been able to work and happen.
But for some reason, the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Defense don't see it that same way.
Yeah. And it's the old, if you can't prove him... Oh, what is it? No, I guess it's not if you can't prove him innocent, but, if there's just an error of a shadow of a doubt, then no, we got to maintain, strategic relations and all this, which, again, we've talked about this before. You can still do that and still hold them accountable for it. It'll complicate things, but unfortunately, that's the way ethics works.
Yeah.
Doing the ethical thing isn't always the easiest thing to do, and you have to deal with the consequences thereafter. And I think, what was Mike Pompeo's job before he became Secretary of State?
It's the director of the CIA.
Boom. How do we have such a direct contradiction now from a former CIA director to the new CIA director?
Right. Because
it's insane.
The information is the same. Nothing has been different. I mean, there might be some other changes in the staff underneath them, but that's still not going to make enough of a difference for them to have such a vastly different view on,
And this is going to... It's going to completely, I think, derail Pompeo and Mattis's careers in the future as far as staying in the administration.
Well, who is it then because I just got an update yesterday that someone is going to step down.
Bye-bye. Yeah, the White House Secretary, John Kelly.
John
Kelly. He's out supposedly by the end of the year.
Yeah.
Or before the first of the year, whatever you want to call that.
Damn it.
Which doesn't surprise me either. Because he's been mixed up in a lot of stuff lately. And which, again, we got back to, you remember when he was first looking at taking that job, his wife had told him numerous times, like, don't do this.
Yes.
And he's like, well, I have to. I gotta go in there. I gotta try to clean house. And this is what he's going to get for it in the end, man. You can't tie yourself to the Trump train and not deal with the after effects. But, the fact that the administration officials, because I don't know, it's hard for me to say that Gina Haspel as CIA director isn't an executive branch senior official, because in black and white she is. But I think being attached to the CIA, it makes it kind of its own little gray area. Would you say?
Because she is technically
a part of
the executive branch.
Yeah, because all these departments are, but
because they're part of the Department of Justice. Right?
Yeah, but it's an appointed position, just like Secretary of State and all this stuff. But there's something that's different about it when you compare it to the other cabinet level positions, like Secretary of State and Defense and all that. But
the information that the head of the CIA is privy to seems to me like it's much different than the information that most other heads of intelligence agencies are privy to.
Yes, for sure.
not most of those other places have black sites and have shit like that. You know, there's a lot of stuff. Like I said, think that the CIA has that a lot of the other places don't.
Yeah,
you know,
it's definitely its own animal for sure.
But I mean,
come January,
I don't like the idea of it being completely separate either, because it's important. I think that with that power, you Spider-Man it, and it has great responsibility, and you have to have somebody looking over and, like, you know, providing oversight for that. You know, I think that's really important.
And that's the whole point of the director position of the CIA being an appointed position, is so that the executive branch can have oversight of that branch directly.
Yeah. Unless you have an executive that's willing to ignore facts and information that's being presented to them. Cheers, buddy.
Cheers, mate.
43, dog. 43.
Boom. It's getting up there.
Yeah.
But I wanted to bring up the fact that come January, you know, you may find, you know, Pompeo and Mattis might find themselves being, you know, enthralled in all these different investigations that the new Democratic-led Senate, or not Senate, House may choose to start, you know, running. You know, we don't know for sure yet, but looking at who's coming in and some of the chips on their shoulders from the last couple of years, I wouldn't be surprised if it just turns into Subpoena Central, Investigation Central.
Well, and I have to wonder. All right, so let me talk this through with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because Mike Pompeo and Mattis didn't come in until after Trump Dog Millionaire is already in office.
Yes.
Right? So I got to wonder how much they will be roped into those investigations, you know? Because if they do, right, then that means that the collusion and the nastiness in the White House right now and in the current administration runs deeper than we think that it does. Because that means that it's currently still happening right now, you know, and it's not something that they did and moved on from. And that's kind of what largely I feel like the narrative has been, is that most of it was in the beginning collusion to get in the office and do all this stuff. You know, now he's just an asshole doing shitty things in the office. And so this, I think, would broaden the umbrella almost, you know, as to how terrible the president looks. You know, do you understand what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
And I think my point more is the fact that you now have at least to me anyways, you have the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Defense now, you know, clearly choosing their team, the Trump loyalty team, over, say, the loyalty of the office and the nation.
Absolutely.
And I think that is going to spell disaster for their careers come January, where they're going to be at, you know, in the hierarchy of who to go after first or whatnot. But I mean, the fact that you sit up there and you can just spin these, you know, all this information, and clearly, I mean, it's like watching a confirmation for a Supreme Court justice, man. It's get up there and they get asked these questions and they say everything around the truth, but never actually get to the truth.
Yeah.
And it drives me nuts. And I think that when it comes to repercussions, I think in January, you know, sometime in the early part of next year, they may be, you know, dragged down by some of that spin by being too close and towing that loyalty line to the Trump camp.
Definitely, because if enough negative stuff starts to come out, they'll be forced to resign or asked to resign, because as unstable as the current administration is socially and in regards to the actual people staffing it, you know, it's so shaky that they can't afford to have some of the few employees that they have looking terrible.
Yeah.
You know? So the moment that anything starts to come up between Mattis or Pompeo, they'll be, like I said, asked to or forced to resign.
Oh yeah.
You know, so
it'll be like
I can see that.
It'll probably be like Jeff Sessions being essentially asked to resign. Be like, all right, man, well, you need to leave because this is over. We're done. And I think that John Kelly's probably going through the same thing right now. He's probably being forced out. For what reason, 100%, I don't exactly know, but I don't know if it's because he hasn't played that loyal companion gig as well as maybe Trump wants him to, But, nothing really stands out to me as being a highlight point of something that happened recently or something that would force him out of office. But
Yeah.
I don't know. Either way, it'll be interesting going forth. I did run across this clip of Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky, talking about the closed door hearings and all this stuff. And he brought up a really interesting point. He was talking he brought reference to the deep state in this. And he was talking about the process of, essentially he and actually a lot of other people, including, Senate minority leader right now, Chuck Schumer, and Dick Durbin and Bob Corker and all these other people, that they think that Gina Haspel should brief the entire Senate on all of this Khashoggi stuff. Again, I'm sure it'll be another closed door, but they think that the rest of the senators have the right to know about all this stuff if they want to vote. They're looking at the vote for that, pulling out support in the war in Yemen. And I think this is a direct causal relationship to that.
And we should be clear really quick before we move on, because we did talk about that last week. And the vote that the Senate did last week, essentially just kind of a Cliff Notes kind of version, right?
Mm-hmm.
The vote that they did was not on the actual bill itself.
No.
Right? The vote was essentially to start the process on discussion of this bill.
Yeah.
Right? Just so that everyone is clear of what this is, right? There's still a long path for this bill, but this is a really good first step to it actually being there to be able to be debated on the floor.
Yeah, there's a word for it, and it's eluding me right now. But yeah, it's essentially they're getting permission, a vote. It's kind of like voting it out of committee onto the floor, right? It's going to go forward to the actual Senate vote now that they voted on the resolution to do it. And so now they're going to do it eventually, and that's why people are trying to get, they're trying to push for the whole Senate to be briefed on this, because it's important information that
I agree.
I think all elected officials probably deserve to know this in a classified capacity so that they can make an informed decision on whether or not that the pros and cons outweigh whatever, the effects of pulling out of the war in Yemen are going to entail.
Do you think that if that happens, if the entire Senate is briefed by Gina Haspel, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then that bill gets passed through the Senate, do you think that the House is then briefed on that information when they?
I don't think so at the House level. I don't think so.
Maybe the leaders,
probably committee leaders and
different caucuses,
probably
and whatnot.
It would probably be like the House Intelligence Committee and the same kind of thing. It would be the leaders of those committees, because that's a lot of people.
Well, and I don't see some of those Republican people voting yes on that without having that information. Just looking to their homeboys in the Senate and being like, yeah, all right, I'll buy what you're saying. Not that they don't work together. I'm sure they got homeboys in the Senate, but at a certain point, you're not going to be. If you're a senator and I'm a representative, and you're like, listen, I seen the information, I'm telling you, just do it. I might be like, fuck you, I'm not going to just do it. Like,
not blindly going to follow.
I'm gonna do this. Like I want to see that shit first.
Don, I wish we lived in that world. But I have a feeling there's enough people that'll vote along party lines in the House that it would pass, even if they didn't have the full briefing. They might have like a declassified version of something that they could get their eyes on, or, I would imagine there's got to be some way.
A redacted version.
Yeah, something, instead of being fully classified, maybe it would be what's the next level down from classified?
Committee confidential? Yeah,
something like that. And just have the committee leadership. And that way the committee leadership could then, say, hey, no, this shit's real. This isn't all bullshit. This, it's all pretty simple. But like I said earlier, Rand Paul was making a point that, for an elected official like him to be hearing about, essentially to hear the news from the New York Times, the Washington Post, and have that be essentially the only source of information on that issue that they have is problematic for somebody that should be able to make an informed decision.
Yes.
And if he said that essentially to him is that's a real life version of the so-called deep state. It's the upper leadership getting access to classified intel so that they can make an informed decision, but everyone else is left in the dark to read the news just like us and hear about it.
That's pretty
the way we hear about it.
That's pretty interesting because I definitely don't agree. I definitely don't feel like a senator should have the same amount of information that I do about what's going on. Like, you should know more about this shit than I should. Like,
yeah, I would hope so.
You should know way more about it than I should.
Yeah.
You should have more sources than just the fucking New York Times to find out about this information. That's crazy.
Yeah. But it's real. It's real, and it's a really good point.
That seems absurd.
Yeah. And so I don't know what's going to happen going forward. I'm sure some news may trickle out slowly this week, and we might hear something about what the next moves are. And I don't know when the next actual Senate break and stuff is, but I know it's got to be coming up soon because of Christmas and New Year's and all that. So I don't know if we'll see it this year. You've seen a lot of people over the last few weeks making all these moves like that. We had mentioned last week that subpoenas going out for James Comey and Loretta Lynch.
Yes. Because
that's kind of their last ditch effort to try to get in there and get some more stuff done.
Yeah.
But, there was one more point I want to make about Rand Paul. He talked about, maybe it was Bob Corker or Lindsey Graham, one of those. Either way, they were saying that, at the end of the day, if I don't hear about this intelligence, I may not vote on the budget bill that's supposed to be coming up, and I may abstain from that. So we may shut the government down over something like this, depending on how many people take. It was either Rand Paul, Lindsey Graham, or Bob Corker.
And that's unfortunate because we already have a president who's saying that he's willing to shut the government down if they're not going to put funding for the wall. And now we have at least one senator of those three, that's willing to threaten to shut the government down.
Yeah. And who knows how realistic that threat is and how plausible it is. Just because one guy says it doesn't mean a bill's not going to get passed. But with such a tight margin, at least in the Senate, that one vote could make a difference.
Huge difference.
And we've seen that shit with pretty much everything over the last few years. That one or two vote difference. How many times do we look at Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins and John McCain as swing votes on whether a major piece of legislation passes or not?
Yeah.
You remember John McCain's fucking epic mic throwdown? Boom! Voting no down for the repeal and replace?
Yeah.
Healthcare bill?
Full repeal of the ACA. Yeah.
He's like, nah.
I ain't doing that
Boom.
shit.
And then everybody, the look on people's faces, that was such a dramatic moment as far as Senate politics goes.
Well, that's what they get for. I remember when they passed the budget because it was the budget that had in there the repeal of the mandate, right? And when that happened, an entire group of political people in the Senate chamber started to chant, na, 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 hey, 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 goodbye. And I'm like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. Like, how old are you? You're like 70 years old, right? You're like 70 years old and this is what you're doing? Like, you're fucking joking me, right?
Yeah.
Just go home.
You're supposed to be professional, man.
And go home. It was disgusting. It was disgusting to watch people act like that are supposed to be representatives of like the masses in this country. That was horrible.
Well, I don't know. That might be reflective. Honestly, if you think about it.
Yeah. No, I was not happy about that.
Yeah. I'm not happy with the general degradation of the entire political process over the last, you can even look to the Obama years for that.
Yeah.
But, it's really interesting because I don't know if there's really much more to say on that other than we're going to kind of see what happens going forth because the actual Senate vote will eventually happen. And, from there it'll get kicked to the House and then I'm sure changes will be made and then it'll be kicked back to the Senate and then probably put in front of Trump to sign. But
I think that there's one last thing that I want to hit on, right?
Lay it on me, baby.
I noticed that there was a lot of people a lot of pieces, right, that talked about Jamal Khashoggi's death, renewing focus in Yemen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is kind of a point that you tried to make to me like a couple weeks ago that I didn't really take the right way. That I after, whatever this moment I had earlier this week, that I find it simultaneously unfortunate and also good, right? That one person's death renewed the interest in the death of tens of thousands of people. Because that's what we're talking about, right?
And I think in Yemen, hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's the worst humanitarian crisis in the world.
Yep.
And one person's death, they're saying, it brought back focus to Yemen.
Yeah.
Why is this not a big enough deal beforehand? And I think that's kind of a point that you were trying to make to me when you were talking about some other humanitarian crisis.
I think it was
in Turkey or some shit like that.
It's the old Stalin line. I think it's Stalin or Lenin, but I think it was Stalin. It said, one death is a tragedy. 1 million is a statistic.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's the power that one death can have.
And I thought that was very interesting. Like I said, it renewed my thought in the point that I was pretty sure you tried to make to me a couple of weeks ago. And I just thought that was so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And
I mean, listening to, because I think this we can kind of directly segue into the President Bush stuff, but when you look at America's involvement in the broader scope of the Middle East in general, right?
Yes.
Our involvement there over a period of time, we're not going to argue whether it's right or wrong, because I think it doesn't really matter at this point, because it's a problem we just have to deal with now, because mistakes were made in the past on all different levels. And for whatever reason, we are in the situation we are now.
Yeah.
We cannot go back and fix these things.
This is where we're at.
It is. We just have to deal with it and try to figure it out from here. And I think, I don't know if the U.S. pulling support from the war in Yemen will affect really any major change into that situation.
Yeah.
Because I believe that mostly our involvement has been on the funding of weapons and troops and, training of troops and all this from Saudi Arabia, giving them weapons and training on those weapons to use in the war. I think that's most of our involvement there. I don't think we have much in the way of boots on the ground in Yemen.
No.
CIA stuff,
when it
special
comes to
ops.
Boots on the ground, what we have is military advisors there that, like you said, are doing the training, but they are also there with the people who are doing the airstrikes and conducting the airstrikes and kind of helping them pick targets or do whatever, is what they're doing. At least advising on targets, because they're not allowed to help pick.
And so
they're
then
allowed to advise on targets.
So we'll essentially be pulling out there and letting them to their own devices at this point.
Yes.
Which I think when you look at how they generally wage war themselves, just looking at what they've done so far in Yemen, it's not really going to get any better. If anything, I think it's going to get worse, but it is what it is at this point.
Yeah. So I have one. Oh, hold the fuck up.
What's happening? Who's playing? What game are you watching? We're watching Red Zone.
Kansas City. Pretty sure that's. Oh shit! It's not Spencer Ware. Who the fuck was that? God damn it.
So,
Damian Williams. Anyway, sorry. So the last thing that I have on Khashoggi, right, is that on Tuesday after this briefing happened with Gina Haspel, right, the White House announced that it planned to send General Mattis and Mike Pompeo to brief the House and not Gina Haspel. Which I think is a horrible fucking mistake.
It's the same mistake they just made.
Yeah. And I almost guarantee that they're going to, if they do that, Gina Haspel will have to come a week later.
I guarantee you.
The same thing will happen.
Because they're going to be like, this is worthless. We're not getting any information. We need the CIA to tell us what they know.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very legitimate grievance. Like we said, if our elected officials are going to make any form of an actual informed decision on a piece of legislation, whether to vote for it or not, then they need to actually be informed enough to make an informed decision.
Yes.
Otherwise, what are we doing here? Just playing party politics? That sounds like a great idea. Just going to play party. I don't like it. Play softball. Yeah. Whose team are you on?
So, I think that's all I got for that. You want to move on to President Bush?
President George Herbert Walker Bush.
Cool. So there's one thing that I want to say before, like, to preface this, right?
Mhm.
Is that this last week, since we talked about this, there's obviously been a lot of reporting on President Bush.
All week long.
A lot of reporting. So I've heard all kinds of stories, all kinds of whatevers, right? Some good, some bad, some really bad. We're going to talk about all these things today, right?
Yeah.
One thing that kind of struck me in this week, especially as I was listening to Jeremy Scahill today on the Intercepted podcast, right?
Got me
He's
heated.
talking about, we don't need to recognize the good things about him because that's what the history books are for, and that's what politicians are for. We need to talk about the terrible shit that he did. We need to talk about all the bad stuff that he did because that's what really matters, and that's how we should remember him, right? And the time for this is not now. It's whatever. And I think that that's bullshit, right? My problem is the guy's corpse is not even fucking buried, Give a little bit of time of respect because that's what I feel like everybody deserves, right?
Yeah.
So on that point, Jeremy Scahill compares President Bush to all of these numerous people that have been taken senselessly by police violence, right? And how the media took them and slandered them right upon their death. And why should the president not be held to the same standard, Which I did think was interesting that they're the same, right? Not those situations, but the president is the same as anybody.
Mm-hmm.
He shouldn't be treated any better on the whole than any other person, right? But I think that point is laid out incorrectly in the way that that's not to say that we should shit on President Trump. It's to say that we shouldn't shit on the people that are being murdered by police senselessly in the streets. I think that's the point that we should take from that.
Yeah.
Not that, well, if this is how we're going to treat them, then we should shit on, President Bush too. Because I think I said Trump just a minute ago, but it's, that's not the point I think should be taken from that. It's that you should respect everybody in their time of death. And at that time, everyone deserves to be respected. There's always time to talk about the mistakes that somebody made.
Mm-hmm.
But at that time, they're dead. Let's honor them a little bit. Let's put them in the ground. And then we can talk about everything.
Yeah.
And that's why I feel like at this time, it's appropriate for us to talk about all of these things.
Mm-hmm. Well,
but the day after, when he's still lying in state, when you can still go and see his body, I don't think that's really the time to be fucking slandering him in the media.
No. But I will say that knowing Jeremy Scahill, the way we know him,
totally made sense.
And just The Intercept in general and what they put forth. I mean, they have labeled the entire Bush family as war criminals for years.
Long time.
For years and years and years.
McCain. When John McCain died, they called him a war criminal too.
They have had chips on their shoulders for a long time. And I think the problem is their arguments are totally disingenuous.
Yes.
They're not wrong because all the information they lay out is factually true. But in proper context, given the time, the place, what the government was back then, how it operated back then, it could have been any other Republican who was in the chair at the time.
Yeah.
Would be getting the same.
Right, but it makes it easier to understand.
Yeah, if you look at it in proper context, it's much easier to understand. And it was this is going back to the 80s and the early 90s with 2018 glasses on and looking at it back then. Of course, everything we did back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, even the 90s, compared to the way we perceive things now, looking back then, there's a reason why in 2018 and 2017, Confederate statues were a massive issue. And in the 90s, they weren't.
Right.
There's reasons for that. It's because the society has progressed, whether we like that or not. I mean, it's an inevitability that will happen. And you can't look back on the past through revisionist history glasses like that.
Yeah.
I mean, for Jeremy Scahill, I give him the benefit of the doubt because he was on the ground during like the first Gulf War.
He was. Yeah.
He saw the massive, humanitarian problems that were occurring. And I mean, and like I said, not wrong about that.
Well, it made
Very
it
true.
Made it sound like the dots he's connecting now, he was connecting back then also. It makes it sound like he's understood all of this whole time. So I think it made it a little bit easier for me to understand why he carries why he bears that cross so heavy, you know?
Oh, yeah, I totally understand it.
Because he's felt that way the whole time. That at the time that we're saying, you know, of course, when we look on it now, we can see it, whatever. But he's been seeing it this way the whole time, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that's...
And if you look at, and if you listen to his podcast with that context in mind...
It's good.
You understand it, and it's like, yeah, no, that's good. That's all good quality material. But if you come at it, you know, if you don't understand that about them or how they work, and it's the same thing... It's no different than when I read an article or watch a segment on Fox News or CNN. You know which way they're spinning it so that you can unwind it back a little bit to get to the truth a little bit.
This is the same way that, like I said, it's really intense to listen to, but if you can put your head in the right spot, it's great. You know, it's good information.
Yeah. Every time I put on an Intercepted podcast, I know what I'm going to get.
Yeah.
But the good stuff, there is good stuff in there.
It's much better than...
It's almost you listen over the narration.
And I gotta say, Harrison Butker just missed a fucking field goal to win the game, and so Kansas City and Baltimore are tied up at the end of the game. It's about to go into fucking OT.
Oh, baby.
I also have to say that I'm playing Lacey in the playoffs this week, babe, so check this. I picked up Spencer Ware because she had Kareem Hunt and he went the fuck down, and I got his backup. She got the backup's backup. Fucking whatever Williams, who's been vulturing on the touchdowns, didn't play his ass this week.
Oh.
He's on her bench with 17 points.
Ooh, no.
That could have helped her beat me this week. I got this shit.
You're feeling good about your chances?
I got this. Okay. What the fuck was I saying?
So you were talking about essentially getting some information from the Intercept.
Okay. So Intercepted Podcast is better than Pod Save America. Right?
1,000%.
Because Pod Save America is like 3 times as much propaganda as the Intercepted is. Like, Intercepted is just good information, like good Glenn Greenwald, fucking hardcore truth journalism, you know?
Yeah.
Just with that guy's vision in it.
With the hardcore lefty.
But Pod Save America is just fucking...
It's 90% propaganda.
Bullshit. Yeah, it's crazy.
You try to fact check one of their episodes. Oh my God.
I listen to it once a week. I force myself
Pod Save America?
At least one episode of Pod Save America a week because I think it's important to hear what they're taking from the situation, you know, and what's being told to people who are on not the far left because they're not Antifa, you know, but they're definitely super deeply progressive people.
Yeah,
is who their audience is.
The problem with the left now is that there's so many different categories of the left now. There's so many different areas. Like if you're looking at it on that pendulum swing, right? You know, you have like your center left people. Like I can't even say Dave Rubin anymore, but somebody like
I would call Dave Rubin center left.
Probably, yeah, but he wouldn't.
You think
he wouldn't say that himself because
he calls himself a classical liberal. I mean, and classical liberalism sits, I would say, fairly in the middle of the left.
Yeah, but I think and this is a different conversation, but I think his economic views on the free market are much more hardcore libertarian, sometimes verging on ANCAP stuff that kind of, I don't know, socially he's kind of left, but he's extremely libertarian when it comes to economics and fiscal policy.
Yeah.
And so I don't know where that actually puts him, but yeah, generally center left, we'll say.
Yeah.
So there's, you know, there you have your general center left people, which usually we can have conversation with.
Left of center, I feel like is
that's a good one.
Easier way to
and then you kind of have the socialist light people that are like Nancy Pelosi that are kind of just doing it to reach out to that base that's a little farther left. So they're trying to play a little farther left, but they're still kind of classic lefty Democrat liberal. And then you have that, you know, the next stage of like the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's,
Bernie Sanders.
Yeah. And they're outright socialists. And then even farther to the left from that,
socialists, let's give them their credit.
Let's do that. Because democracy and socialism work so well together.
I told you, we could talk about that all day. I could defend democratic socialism.
I know you could.
I think I could do a pretty all right job of it too.
And I could probably do the same thing with libertarianism, but the problem is we have no field studies. It hasn't worked out well for anybody in either direction. But then, like I said, even farther to the left of that, you have your activist Antifa type and your hardcore leftist anarchists almost.
Yeah.
Whereas on the right now, you kind of have your far right extremists, neo-Nazi type, people, and then you have kind of your trashy right conspiracy theorists, Alex Jones types, and the popularity of that base has grown. You have a look of astonishment on your face right now.
My stomach is gonna fall out of my butt. The fucking Dolphins just beat the Patriots to knock them out of a fucking playoff clinch. I can't even believe that just fucking happened to me. I'm telling you, man. I couldn't even say anything for a second. That is fucking insane. With no fucking seconds left on the clock, they run in a goddamn touchdown. That is absurd.
That's history.
Believe that just happened.
Oh yeah, screw the Patriots. Screw Tom Brady.
Oh my God.
So the Pats aren't going to the playoffs anymore?
They did not clinch it. I believe that this still keeps them in the hunt.
Okay.
But they did not clinch it today with this win. The Dolphins were in the
look
hunt.
at that.
I think that the Dolphins just clinched a playoff berth. I think that's what just happens.
That's that schoolyard.
That's that schoolyard shit, and they fucking got it there. And
look at that.
Got it there.
Look at that. Yeah, throw that ball, baby.
No seconds left.
You got some serious... Oh, man.
Playoffs, and I think the Pats have to go into a wild card now. That was fucking crazy.
That makes me so happy.
God. Oh, my God. What an amazing day this is. Do you know that also in this same game, I'm going to talk about this in sports, Tom Brady overpassed Peyton Manning for the most fucking passing touchdowns ever. Ever.
Today?
Yes.
So this game?
Today, in this same game, this was going to be, I think, the 10th time in a row that they had clinched the playoffs.
I absolutely hate that Tom Brady's record backs up his cockiness.
Isn't that horrible?
100,000%. Yeah. I hate every second of it, but the statistics don't lie.
I can't believe that just happened.
I love that, though. Is he all butthurt? Oh, that's red zone. He's gone.
I cannot believe that just happened.
I would love to see the look on his face, because when he gets angry...
I'm going to watch his post game tomorrow.
There you go.
That's what I'm going to do, because that's going to be crazy. Man, I'm so happy we got to record that. Barbara listens to the podcast, and when we recorded during the Seahawks game, she told me that she really liked listening to the stuff that I had to say.
Oh, yeah. It's great because you get a little running commentary if you missed the game.
Yeah. So we were talking about George Bush. So do you want to? Yeah. Do you have? Looks like you have a little timeline there.
Okay, so I wanted to do this because it's really interesting. Because you talked about getting a lot of information from your Intercept podcast, right?
Yeah, and
because you can weed through the narrative that they kind of lay over top of everything, probably more than anyone else.
Like I have a lot of good shit written down, but because probably that's what a lot of people heard this week,
Yeah.
Because I think it's a big deal. Like he helped pass the American with Disabilities Act. I think that's a huge, huge, huge piece of legislation, right? That my mom would kick me in the dick if I didn't talk about.
Oh.
I think that it's a big deal.
A motherly dick kick.
He was
ouch.
I think it's a big deal.
Kathy would too. She
was involved in China. I think it's a big deal that he was involved in
U.S. envoy to China
in Germany. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I think all those things are huge, monumental deals.
Absolutely.
I think that it's a big deal that, however it happened, the first Gulf War ended quickly. Whether whoever you want to credit that to.
What was it, like 100 hours or something like that?
Yeah, super short amount of time. So whoever you want to credit that with, it happened while he was president. So I think that it's good that the first Gulf War ended quickly, even if his son came in and carried on the second one. The first one was over quickly. I think that's good. I think there's a lot of good shit that he did.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
There's also a lot of sketchy shit.
In proper context.
That I'm going to read part of this Intercept article to you.
And so before you do that, I was just going to say that because
in this segment,
you pulled a lot of that stuff from the Intercept, right? And I pulled a lot of the stuff from the New York Times Daily.
Perfect.
And it was so interesting to listen to the stark differences between the overall feel of the New York Times podcast and the overall feel of the Intercept podcast. Intercept, highly aggressive, highly pointed at essentially peeing on the grave of this guy that just died. New York Times, the complete opposite.
Yes.
Probably, which I would imagine if George Bush was in the office now doing these same things now, they would be just peeing all over his grave as well. But due to the nature of time passing, so on and so forth, I don't know what the deal is. Maybe they're just doing it because, like you said, his body's barely cold. He's not even in the ground.
I think
it's not the time, not the place.
Just a general respect thing.
Yeah.
I think is kind of what the deal is.
So you want to take the lead on this and start her off?
On the stuff that I have?
Sure.
Yes. So, let's see. So there was a couple of things that I found, because there was also an article from, let's see, sorry.
There was definitely no shortage of articles and news clips and podcasts this week about him.
One in particular that I have here that is about problems with him during the AIDS crisis. I'm just trying to find.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of people that credit him. It's from the New Yorker.
Okay.
And I'm pretty sure it's an opinion piece, but it's still, it's a piece from somebody who lived through the AIDS crisis at that time, right? There's a lot of people who put at least partial blame, if not full blame, on H.W. Bush for so many people dying during the AIDS crisis, that he just didn't take it as seriously as he should have, didn't allocate enough money to it. And I think that could be said not only for him, but for a lot of the general public in America, that people didn't take it as seriously as they should have,
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
A lot of people were concerned it was just happening to gay dudes. Being gay still freaked a lot of people out. It didn't matter to them, fuck the fags and all, whatever people were going to say at that time, it didn't matter to them.
Yeah.
So, and not that makes it right, but I think I think that would reign true for a lot of people during the 90s.
Definitely.
They looked at being gay way differently than they do now.
Yes. Again, looking back at the past in 2018 colored glasses.
Yes. So that is something that obviously that people will carry with them about George Bush, especially people in the gay community, people who are affected by AIDS.
If you lived through that time.
90s.
Yeah.
There was one particular protest that they talked about where mostly partners or friends of people who had died because of AIDS, right? They took their ashes and they marched to the Capitol and dumped them on the lawns of the White House.
Oh, that's a good protest.
Yeah. And I thought that was fucking crazy.
Yeah, that's the symbolism there is pretty heavy.
Yes. And so that was one of the things. Then another thing is, so I'm going to get into the Intercept stuff.
Let's do it.
So the Intercept is reporting on stories about from the Rolling Stone and from other places that connect a lot of things, but the Rolling Stone stories in particular connect President H.W. Bush and the Iran-Contras, right?
Yep.
Because as we know, he was the Vice President to Ronald Reagan, who got in a lot of shit for the Contras.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And so...
It's a lovely little Family Guy episode about that.
Yes.
They do a nice little brief about it, and it's actually pretty factual. It's pretty good.
I'm going to read a couple of paragraphs from this Intercept article.
American Dad, sorry, fact check that.
That's all right. That is going to kind of outline the stuff that we're going to talk about.
Okay.
So I'm going to go ahead and read this to everybody. So this is from an Intercept article. George H.W. Bush, Iran-Contra, blah, blah, blah. I will tweet it out and we can talk about it, right? So here's the article. Bush's spy history is murky. According to Russ Baker, author of Family of Secrets, A History of the Bush Family in the Late 1950s, Secrets, A History of the Bush Family. In the late 1950s, Bush allegedly allowed the CIA to use an offshore oil rig he owned near Cuba as a staging ground for anti-Castro Cubans to raid their homeland. In 1967, Bush visited Vietnam as a freshman member of Congress, and Baker claims that Bush was accompanied by his business partner, a CIA agent, to investigate the Phoenix program, the CIA torture and assassination operation that killed more than 20,000 Vietnamese by 1971. Have you heard of the Phoenix operation before?
Yeah, essentially it was the CIA's attempt to, because they were going after the Viet Cong and the communists, and they were essentially they were using the same tactics the Viet Cong used. They were, kidnapping, interrogating, torturing, assassinating. Same kind of game. Yep. They were trying to, mimic their same game to try to make, it was like they wanted to fight fire with fire type of thing.
So in this first paragraph, they talked about Bush allegedly allowing the CIA to use an offshore oil rig he owned near Cuba, right?
Yep.
This was reported before President Bush got involved in the government. He owned an oil company, right? And so
how he ended up in Texas.
Yeah, and they had they had oil rigs all over the place, right? And so this was one that I believe they said they moved over near Cuba, right? And once it was there, allegedly the CIA gave soon-to-be President Bush a list of people that he should hire, right?
Yes.
And the CIA then took those people, trained them on the oil rig, and then used it almost as a base for them to go to Cuba and to use to take out anti-Castro action and try and overturn the government there.
Yes, because
right?
this was during Castro's rise to power. Exactly. He was taking over.
And so this is how, allegedly, how he first got connected with the CIA, is allowing them to use soil.
Because this is all towards the end, time-wise, towards the end of the Cold War.
It's the late 50s.
Yes. And so this is, late 50s. So essentially, this is still peak Cold War time. Yes. Tensions are high. Anything communist is bad.
Exactly.
It's bad, 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 bad.
So, next paragraph. These pieces come together when Bush served as CIA Director from January 1976 to January 1977. During his tenure, he met his future National Security Advisor, Donald Gregg, who was involved in operations linked to the Phoenix program as a former CIA station chief in Saigon. There, Gregg fought alongside Cuban exile and CIA agent Felix Rodriguez, who helped track down and kill Cuban revolutionary Che Guevara. Bush was at the CIA during the height of Operation Condor, an international kidnap, torture, murder apparatus run by 6 Latin American dictatorships and coordinated by Washington. In an Operation Condor plot carried out in October 1976, Chilean secret police assassinated former Chilean diplomat Orlando Letelier and American Ronnie Moffett with a car bomb in Washington, D.C. Bush misled an FBI investigation about Chile's responsibility. Also, as spy chief, Bush met his Panamanian counterpart, Manuel Noriega, allegedly already suspected at the time of drug trafficking. As president, Bush ordered the invasion of Panama in 1989 to remove Noriega from power, who was the country's ruler by that point.
Yep.
As vice president to Ronald Reagan, Bush became an architect of the secret government that came into being for the Iran-Contra operations. Official investigations for Iran-Contra are limited to the period after October 1984, when Congress banned military and intelligence services from providing direct or indirect support to the Contras. That is super important. 1984.
Yes. Okay? It's an important year.
But Gary Webb's expose on CIA and Contra links to cocaine smuggling, the Dark Alliance, dates to 1981, the covert U.S. support for the Contras. Cobbled together from remnants of Nicaragua's defeated National Guard, the Contras were notorious for torture, assassination, and other atrocities. The Phoenix Condor link reached Central America as the CIA recruited veterans of Argentina's dirty war to train the Contras, who ignited a decade-long war that killed an estimated 50,000 Nicaraguans.
I think this would be a good time to say my blog post this week. I'm going to do a little write up on the Iran-Contra controversy, because that needs context, and if you don't know anything about that, that's a little bit. But so watch for my blog post next week.
Yes, because this is the part that's just on the way to this is kind of what my big point was, right? Rolling Stone dates Bush involvement in the Contra War to 1982, right? When he reportedly conspired with CIA Chief William Casey in an operation they codenamed Black Eagle. Working under Bush, Donald Gregg managed finances and operations for the Contras, according to Rolling Stone. Rodriguez handled arms flights to Central America and negotiated with military commanders there. Historian Douglas Valentine has claimed that in 1981, Bush authorized these veterans of the Phoenix program to initiate a Pink Plan terror war against Central American insurgents. Black Eagle marked its operations by relying on the Israeli Mossad to acquire and ship weapons to Central America, employing Panamanian airfields and companies as fronts, according to the Rolling Stone story. But the planes, once emptied of their arms cargo in Central America, were repurposed by Noriega and the Mandolin cartel to ship drugs back to the United States.
Yep.
The CIA allegedly stuck a deal with the Mandolin cartel's primary contact, Barry Seal. In return for Seal hauling weapons to the Contras, the CIA protected him as his operation smuggled an estimated $3 billion to $5 billion in drugs to the United States.
And I forget how he's tied into it, but future Vice President Dick Cheney, I believe, was involved in this situation at some point.
Yes.
I don't remember exactly how.
Yeah.
But that was one of the things I was getting really excited for about Vice coming up, talking to, having Cheney and stuff in there.
Motherfucker, you know what happened? You know what the fuck happened to me this week?
What happened?
Okay, so we were going to go and see that fucking movie for my birthday, right?
Yes.
Shit doesn't come out until Christmas Day.
Somebody's peeing on your
Cheerios. You know how fucking mad I was? Oh my god. So pissed.
What are you going to have to see now?
I don't fucking know. My mom said, well, we could get drunk and go see The Grinch. So we might do that. It was pretty fun. So my big point for this, right, is that if this reporting is legitimate, which I have no reason to believe that it is not, this says that President Bush would have gone down just like Reagan if they would have expanded the investigation back even just 4 years.
Yeah.
If they would have gone back to 1980, not only would the government look way fucking guiltier than it is, but so would way more people in the government who had involvement, not just Ronald Reagan.
Yep. And I think that this time period, starting with the Reagan era, as, you know, because George Bush was the VP for Reagan.
Yes, he was.
I think this is essentially the start of that modern day, which is, I'm glad to say, I don't think exists in as much power as it used to back then, but this is like the modern day neocon Republican formation, how they run the government and how, you know, that shady, I mean, you were essentially funding part of the government with CIA drug runs at this point. And there's actually been a ton of books, and even, I think that latest Tom Cruise movie, what was that called? I don't remember. But I think that's what it was about. They were smuggling weapons into Panama and then smuggling drugs back out. Yeah. And I think it was a completely separate kind of deal because the CIA, if they can make money doing some kind of shady stuff, that's the way they used to do it. I don't think it works that way anymore.
Yeah.
Because I don't think you could get away with it anymore. But that was at a time in history where you could pretty easily get away with stuff like that.
Yeah.
You know, none of that stuff would be possible in 2018. Thank goodness. And I think that's probably why a lot of it has kind of gone to the wayside, I would imagine. But it all kind of, like I said, if you look at it in context with, this wasn't just President George Bush doing this. This was the entire government at the time. You had Lieutenant Colonel, I believe at the time, Oliver North being involved at a high level, so you have military presence there. You have CIA involvement.
Oh, here, let me read this to you. The White House also leaned on Gulf state monarchies to cough up more than $40 million for the Contras, violating the 1984 congressional ban known as the Boland Amendment. In 1985, Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North coordinated with Israel to ship more than 2,000 anti-tank missiles to Iran through Israel in exchange for Iran's assistance in freeing American hostages held in the region, and the profits were used to fund the Contras.
Hence
Is
why
that what you're talking about?
Yep, that's it.
It's so weird.
Hence why they call it Iran-Contra, the big issue that happened. And essentially everybody kind of got off scot-free. Oliver North went on to have a journalist spot at Fox News, which was interesting. And yeah, isn't that funny?
That's just like, what's his name? James Clapper. Now, he perjured himself about all the information that's being, like the metadata, and now he works like he works for MSNBC or some shit.
Oh, yeah.
Like
well, what was that? I want to say Spicer, but no.
Contributor.
The New York politician that got caught up and hit in that prostitute ring. Elliot Spitzer?
Yeah.
Elliot Spitzer. Yeah. He used to be a commentator on CNN.
Super weird.
Yeah. Not anymore, baby.
Not anymore.
Yeah, he got in trouble for... No, that's the Anthony Weiner thing. Politicians, man, they've become so scummy. Yeah. And I don't know if they've become scummy or it just all of a sudden we were able to see it due to technology, And then we're like, whoa, we don't like any of this. Y'all need to start, y'all need to start getting into, get with the program real quick. But so on the other hand, because I did listen to that Intercept podcast this morning, but the Daily, if you want a nice, warm, fuzzy podcast about all the good things from George Bush, you can listen to that one. And, they hit up kind of gave a broad overview of his whole life and how he got into politics. And, it's a very strange thing when you look at a president with literally one of, if not the highest public approval rating in presidential history.
Yeah.
To only serve one term. That is a very interesting situation, right? So I did find out that apparently, I had always had the assumption that the Bush family was a Texas native family. Turns out, no, not at all. Oh, sorry. I keep hitting the button. But there we go. The little OCD things are coming out. But Prescott Bush was his father.
Yes.
And I want you to talk about Prescott Bush in a minute because with the ties to the Nazis. But anyways, he was born in a New England family, very affluent life, and then once the Empire of Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, he was 17 when that happened, and as soon as he turned 18, he joined the Navy. At the time,
youngest pilot ever.
Yeah, youngest pilot in naval history at that time. He was only he was 18, and then flew combat missions. Apparently, he went without to forego a scholarship to Yale so that he can join the war. Then later on, went back to Yale and joined the Skull and Bones Society and all that good stuff.
Yeah,
but he was shot down when he was 20 years old over. He was doing a bombing run. Their plane was shot down, and they just magically, miraculously, when they went down, they were in the area where a U.S. sub was, and the sub was able to come and rescue him.
So lucky.
Yeah. Married his high school sweetheart, Barbara Bush, after the war, after he came back. And then they picked up the family and drove to Texas to start his oil company and make his millions. And, and then you just talked about how that unfolded over time. I did think it was funny. They did look back at when they first moved to Texas. They lived in Odessa, and they lived in a duplex with a shared bathroom next door to an apparent. And I didn't even try to bother to look into this, but the New York Times reported through their podcast they lived next to a mother-daughter prostitute team.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was the most hilarious thing in the world when you look at somebody with such an affluent pedigree. But he was, it didn't take long. Soon he was a millionaire and so on and so forth, and started to look at public office. And then he ran for, was the first thing he ran for a House seat?
Representative.
Yeah.
Representative, senator, president.
Yep.
No, then he was the dude to China.
Yeah.
He was an ambassador to the UN, and then the dude to China, and then the president.
Yes.
And then the vice president, and then the president. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. It's been a long...
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. And then somewhere there was a year where he was CIA director.
Yeah. Jesus.
Yeah. And it was, and it's really funny because he became he was a representative for Texas, I think in the District of Houston, whatever district that is.
Yeah. Whatever.
But eventually, he ran for Senate and then apparently lost the first time. And Richard Nixon, who was president at the time, I guess kind of felt bad for him and gave him started to give him appointed positions to get him into the federal government anyways. Yeah. And then later on would become senator, and then, like you said, U.S. diplomat or U.S. ambassador to the UN, U.S. envoy to China, CIA director for a year, and then ultimately becoming, after he lost the primary to Ronald Reagan asked him to be his running mate, the number 2 spot in the VP.
Weird. Yeah.
Very strange. But that, again, that was a completely different party at the time. Things were very different back then. The age of the neocon Republican was in full swing, for sure. And thank God, it doesn't happen that much anymore.
Yeah.
Because Lindsey Graham used to be a pretty hardcore neocon, and now I don't think it's so much, but I don't know. But I thought it was really interesting. He was the VP for Reagan for the 8 years, and then turned around and apparently was the first president since, I wrote it down, Martin Van Buren, who was the 8th president of the United States, but he was the first vice president to go on and become president after that. And that was back in 1837, Martin Van Buren went.
Wow.
Yeah. He used to be, I don't remember who he was vice president to.
Like James Tyler, right?
Something like that. The seventh president.
Yeah.
But yeah, he actually ended up becoming the eighth president of the United States. And then it was all the way up till, George Herbert Walker Bush to become the second VP to become president.
Wow.
Very strange. But yeah, it was, when you look at his 4-year tenure, a single term president, having as much involvement in the foreign policy realm as probably any president until that time, that wasn't in an active, open national war like World War I, World War II, Vietnam War, stuff like that. This was he oversaw the end of the Cold War and the fall of the USSR, the Soviet Union.
Yes.
And
helped Reconstruction after that.
Yes.
Aided with that greatly. And from what I understand, he wasn't credited quite enough, or isn't often credited quite enough with that.
Yeah, because it's
Reagan
not
took such a...
Yeah.
Because he's president at the time.
The fall of an empire usually does not happen peacefully.
Yes.
Without, a war, generally. And when you look at big picture now, because there was a lot of people that died and all that stuff, but in the picture, the grand scale of watching the Iron Curtain fall and the collapse of the Soviet Union, it was literally an empire that fell and was reborn due to help from the U.S. and other nations like that to become the now Russian Federation.
Yeah.
Which usually would have ended, I don't see how that would have ended in revolution up until this point. Because up until this point in time, every empire essentially crumbled from within due to revolution.
Yeah.
It happens, But, he gets a lot of credit for that. I think Ronald Reagan probably has a lot of credit for that. And like I said, at one point, he had one of the highest approval ratings of 89% at one point. But then still, he got really, really torn up during the next presidential election by a little-known man by the name of, I want to use his real name, but Bill Clinton.
Yeah. You don't remember his full name?
Oh, I don't remember off the top of my head. I remember it's totally weird. Totally different. But anyways.
It's not William.
No, it's definitely not William. But it was really interesting to kind of hear about a politician that I've never really looked into before that much.
Yeah.
And to realize about, just in the general, historical knowledge that I've had, how tied in he was to all of that, how integral his role was into forming the world in the way it is now.
Yeah.
Everything from the Gulf War to the invasion of Panama and, like you said, Manuel Noriega, the Cubans.
Well, I had one more thing too, was we talked a little bit about the first Gulf War, right? That only lasts, like you said, 100 hours or some stupid shit like that. Really not very long at all. But in the ramp up to the first Gulf War, right? There was all kinds of crazy stories that came out about, terrorists going into hospitals and ripping babies out of incubators and murdering people in there and doing all this stuff, right? So after those things come out, it comes out that American PR firms were hired to create those stories.
I heard that.
So those stories aren't even real. So American PR firms are hired by the government to make up these stories, right? And at the same time, there's the Kuwaiti ambassador, his daughter, pretends to be a nurse and goes and testifies somewhere that she saw babies ripped out of incubators.
Yeah, you couldn't do that in today's world.
You know what I'm saying?
Couldn't do that. You couldn't get away with something like that. But back then you could.
And even now, if the first thing that I'm going to say about the Gulf War is that I'm going to credit him for it being as short as it was. You know what I'm saying? That's so wild. That's so fucking wild.
Yeah.
That the government hired public relations firms to make up stories that makes the Gulf War more palatable to the general public so they can go and they can... not that it shouldn't be done because you can't be gassing the fucking courage, but shit. Shit.
That's kind of the old...
lie about it? To straight up make up stories.
Did his son not essentially do the same thing with the WMDs?
Yep, absolutely.
And whether, I mean, you can argue whether the ends justifies the means in that point, but, you know,
That's a tough conversation.
I think at the end of the day, hardly any of this actually matters, and it speaks to it. I mean, it matters, of course, but it speaks to a much larger systemic issue, which is the fact that Congress doesn't declare war anymore, and it hasn't for
the
decades.
president's able to do it under the authorization for use of military force.
Indeed.
That AUMF, that's a fucking Eckler touchdown, bitch.
Which,
God damn it, yes.
when you think about it, is absolutely hilarious when you think that requirement for the president to do things under the eyes of national security, including the authorization of military force
And dealing with immigration.
and dealing with trade deals. It literally, I mean, you're handing, again, the executive branch all the power that Congress is supposed to have.
Yeah.
Why do we keep doing this? And like I said, like I don't like all those. You know, you could say that they're bad things easily, but all these negative things that are tied to Bush and, you know, essentially tied to Reagan, tied to Nixon, tied to Bill Clinton, tied to George W. Bush. I mean, this is all stuff that happened for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, the Congress has never put their foot down and tried to reclaim their power back from the executive.
I mean, you could probably argue that half of the wars that America has been in have been under false pretenses.
Mhm.
You know? I mean, because there's some shit, obviously, like Revolutionary War, you know? I mean, that's also probably too long ago for us to decide whether or not there was some sus shit that went on underneath it, you know? For, like, that America was like, also, if we do this, you know, we can do this. That I don't, you know, but... So Revolutionary War, something we had to get down on. Civil War, totally unnecessary. Some shit we did between ourselves. You know what I'm saying? World War I, some shit we got involved with. World War II, some shit we got involved with. You had to do, you know, coming in, bombing Pearl Harbor, doing shit like that.
Yep.
Vietnam, no fucking reason to be there.
Nope.
You know what I'm saying? Both of the Gulf Wars, hardly any fucking reason to be there besides oil. You know what I'm saying?
Oil.
So
that was the big thing. It was all about oil back then.
Korean Wars,
everything. The whole Iran-Contra thing, the invasion of Kuwait was because Saddam Hussein thought that they were drilling, you know, diagonal wells into
drilling,
their and it's all about fucking oil, man. Insane.
Because they're lighting oil wells on fire.
Yeah,
and they're just burning oil. And
was
like,
that?
No, you can't do that. You're fucking burning gold over here.
Is that Jarhead the movie?
Yeah.
Is that about the first Gulf War or the second?
First,
yeah.
That is. Let me tell you. So for a long time,
that's a crazy movie.
I got Jarhead up there, the book, because that's one of my favorite books I've ever read. When I was in high school, I probably read that thing 12, 13 times back to back.
Ooh.
Just over and over and over and over. I love that fucking book. It's so goddamn good. It's. I think it is.
Is it better than the movie?
By far.
100%.
Yeah, no, there's a lot. I mean, and the movie is great. The movie Jarhead is fantastic. It's also one of my favorite movies. But the book is much better than the movie.
Is that your boy too? Who's the
Jake Gyllenhaal?
Yeah,
That's
Jake
my boy.
Gyllenhaal.
That is my boy. That's one of the things that made me really love Jake Gyllenhaal was how well he did in that movie.
Yeah,
but yeah, no,
he's a good one.
That's a fantastic movie and a fantastic book. If you haven't read it, you should, and you can borrow my copy because it's fucking gold.
I like it.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to try that. What was I gonna say? Oh, I don't remember. That's mostly everything I had on Bush. I mean, there's so much conversation to be had around everything that happened there. Do you feel like you can vamp again? This is going to have to be a pee break podcast.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know why. It just hit me like a freight train.
That's fine. Well, we can move on for Bush and we can start talking about the next one was the blog post for this week.
Yeah.
Okay? So I can talk a little bit about the blog post that we did this week and we can get into it. So like we said earlier, every Thursday, Colin and I do a blog post. And we switch back and forth, weeks. And so this last week was my turn. And I have been doing a series on a book by Dr. Jordan B. Peterson, right? And that book is called 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos. It is this book right here. You guys probably can't see that very well, but that's what this book is. We've talked about this book a lot. Colin and I went and saw Dr. Peterson earlier this year in Seattle and listened to a lecture of his that was really fantastic. We talked about it afterwards. It was awesome. And so the rule for this week, because I've been doing this for, let's see, so that's got to be 16 weeks, 18 weeks since I did one for Thanksgiving that wasn't one of these rules. Excuse me. And so this one was rule number 8. And rule number 8 is tell the truth, or at least don't lie. And so these have become much more personal than they started. They started as almost like
newsy articles on a way.
Yeah, and almost as just like a brief description of the chapter itself.
Yeah.
And it's kind of turned more into how I implement that rule into my life and kind of what I took from that chapter,
Which I'm a fan of.
Yeah, and I think I get a little bit more out of it when I do that. And so in this one, I talked about truth kind of in a couple of different ways.
Yeah.
And one is about just being honest in general, just being honest with people around you, because it's better to live your life that way. You don't have to keep up with any bullshit stories that you've made up. You don't have to worry about anything. It's not whatever. It's just better to just be honest.
Lies begets more lies.
Yeah. We talked a little bit about self-deception, which I said in here, I think sometimes it's kind of some of the worst lies that you can tell. Yourself.
Definitely agree with that.
Yeah, it limits you in a lot of ways. And one of the things that he talked about in particular was lying in the sense that you convince yourself that what you have is better than what you could have.
Yes.
And in that way, you limit where you can go in your life, because there's no point in you trying to do anything better after that.
Yeah, I'm comfortable. I'm good.
Yeah, I thought that was really, really interesting. And I appreciate that. I appreciate that people are getting something out of this, that it's not just a thing that I'm doing for myself, that like a lot of different people will talk to me about it and they'll be like, I really dug this one and like it made me think of this,
Yeah.
And especially like the Thanksgiving one, because I saw so many different people that day. I had so many people that read it just while they're sitting down cooking or doing what the fuck ever in the morning, and they're like, oh man, it made me think of this time when I was at work, when I saw something and I was like, I don't need to put up with that. I deserve better than that. And I decided to stand up for myself and be honest and do something about it, And I don't know. I appreciate that's what it's doing for people.
Yeah, that's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, you listen to, he was on Rogan, a week or two ago? And it seems like
that was a good episode.
Every public forum he takes now, he always prefaces the power of what he's getting from meeting these people that come to his shows and stuff like that, and the stories they tell, and how him speaking and him writing the book and all these things have like people have dramatically improved their lives in some ways.
Yeah.
And to be able to have, hundreds of people every other day come to you and tell you like all these different things, that's on a whole nother level that I don't think many humans get to experience.
Right.
Period. Ever in the history of humanity.
I would love for us to be there one day.
Yeah. And maybe one day, baby. But there was so many different points that you talked about in your blog, right? From, talking about growing up and essentially being in an environment where, lying, stealing, cheating just became normal everyday practice to get through your life.
Yeah.
And to have the ability to identify that at some point and be able to move on and better yourself away from that kind of stuff is half the battle, if not more.
Yeah.
Because, in an addiction situation, they always say that admitting you have a problem is the first step. And I don't know if that's directly to the 12-step program, but I think it applies to a lot of, just life type of things.
Right.
And to have the ability to identify that and then the ability to actually make a conscious decision not to go forth that way anymore is a huge challenge, I would imagine. Would you say that through that time period that you lost friends?
Definitely. There was... I wrote another blog post earlier this year, and I don't remember what it was specifically about, but I wrote about 2 friends that I used to have that I called fucking Thomas and
Sheila.
Hillary or something like that.
Yeah.
And And I'm not friends with them anymore, but at the time they were like my best friends, you know? They were my best friends when I was doing all that shit when I was in high school, when I was first getting into like doing other drugs besides smoking weed. You know, when I first started selling weed was with these guys, and you know, the first times I did ecstasy was with them, and like mushrooms and all kinds of stuff. All this other stuff that I was exposed to, you know, was with these people. And after a certain point, I realized that much more Thomas than Hillary. Hillary was almost more of a bystander on it. That just wasn't. I wasn't being treated well by that person, you know, and it was blinded by the fact that, well, we were like doing dirty shit together, and we were fucking stealing together, and you know, like this guy has my back because this is the one that we're like doing this shit with, you know. But then it comes to a point where I got a sack of weed and he's got a pack of cigarettes, you know, and he's like, well, trade me a bowl of weed and I'll give you fucking, you know, 4 cigarettes or whatever. And I'm like, word, sounds like a plan, you know. And then he's got weed and I got a pack of cigarettes. I'm like, well, I'll give you 4 cigarettes, you give me a bud. And he's like, well, you give me 6 cigarettes, and I'll give you a bud. And I'm like, well, that seems really weird. Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
You know? But, you know, then it starts to come down to a point where they're like, well, you know, the shit that we're bringing to the group means more because you're stealing yours and we're having to get money from somewhere to buy it, you know? And I'm like, well, I don't really know how that makes any sense. You know, that it doesn't matter how we're acquiring what we're getting. Like, we're both getting shit and bringing it to the group to share. So I don't know why that, you know.
It's got some direct analogies to Red Dead.
Yeah. And so stuff like that starts to happen, you know, and that's how I kind of fall out with like those friends and just move on to other shit.
Yeah.
And
there was a point where you talk about picking your battles, right?
Yeah.
And I think this talks about, this talks to the idea of not lying to yourself a lot.
Yeah.
And then, you know, just because somebody says some stupid shit at work or something like that, that doesn't mean you should stop everything and put this person on the spot and tell them why they're wrong and all this shit.
Right.
You know, you have to pick your battles, right?
But it's not always worth it. You know what I'm saying? Like,
it's definitely
honest, not. Being honest is always the right move. Always. You know, but it's not always worth it to be honest. You know, it causes me less problems now, but for a while increasing problems in my life with just being honest, and it maybe wasn't the exact right time.
Yeah.
You know, it just isn't. There is a time and place and a tone for complete honesty.
Yes.
You know? And like I said, sometimes it's just not worth it. And I think the example you came up with is really good. If you hear someone saying some stupid shit around you, like a lot of times it's worth it to just be like, hey, you know, actually, this and this and this. You know? But if you know that person is a fucking prick and they're not going to take that information well and it's not going to do you any good, it's not necessarily worth it for you to go out of your way to do that. You know? But it's worth it for you to come home and be like, listen, you know, this happened today and I heard it and it like really frustrated me. You know? And that's something else I've written down before and haven't talked about that. I feel like, what's the best way to put this without me sounding like a douche? Right? When you are more aware of what's going on, you know, like I would like to venture to say that we are, you know, for doing a podcast like this and being able to connect dots like this, a lot of people aren't, you know, when you have that ability, it's not always beneficial, you know, because a lot of that comes with extreme frustration for things that you see around you
every single day.
And yeah, I really want to find this because I had written it down in like a really good type of way.
So while you're looking for it, let me just touch. Oh, you got it?
No, go ahead.
Okay. I wanted to say, because I did have a thought when you're talking about picking your battles, because I think it's something I'm very passionate about. So when you're talking about the, you know, ideological battlefield or whatever you want to call it, the culture war, the marketplace of ideas, something like that, where somebody's spouting off like that guy at the gas pump this morning.
Yes.
Right? That was not the time and a place to actually have a battle. Right? And so I categorize them into 2 different categories. There are battles of strategic importance that, I mean, these are things that must be fought at the time or in the future at some point.
Yeah.
And then there's kind of the battles of solely ideological importance. It's a martyrdom situation. It's a fruitless conquest. You may be able to, I may have been able to, if I was prepared enough to just throw out a bunch of facts and shove them in this guy's face and get in my car, drop Mike, walk away. But that did nobody any good.
Right.
It might have gave me a little own the libs type of fucking feeling, like the Ben Shapiro feeling, but it's not really going to do any good. That's not a battle worth fighting.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, at least when you talk about picking your battle, that's the way I think about them.
Yeah.
It's not always worth, when Dum Dum at work starts shooting off his mouth about something that realistically he has no concept of what he's talking about.
Yeah.
And you just want to shut him down because you have all the context. We've done all the research. We know why he's wrong. But at the end of the day, who cares? If you don't pay attention to him, he'll shut up, and then we can all move on with our lives.
Well, and that can almost even that can even break down almost to, that's not the right word either, because that means like the same thing, but translate to maybe, like talking to your spouse or like one of your family members, when they're going off about something, and you feel like maybe they're not quite correct, that, well, maybe you could have done this instead of doing this, that's maybe not the time to be totally honest. You know, not because they don't need to hear that, but at that time, they're just trying to vent. They're just trying to get information out and feel better,
Yep.
That's maybe not necessarily the time to be honest.
That's the struggle I have, like, with Carolina sometimes is, and I think just women in general, the difference between men and women is, when my wife comes home and wants to kind of vent about her day, I have to make a conscious effort not to try to fix those things as the conversation goes on, because they don't need to be fixed. They don't. They're kind of meaningless in the grand scheme of things. And me as somewhat of someone who wants to fix things, and it's hard to pull back like that sometimes. But those things, like I said, they're not strategically important.
No.
They're not worth fighting. And at the end of the day, in proper context, all your wife's really looking to do is just to vent and de-stress and stuff like that. The stuff that we would do on probably a daily basis, I would imagine.
Yeah.
And the last thing I want to do when I'm venting is have somebody stop me all the time and try to be like, okay, well, in the future, this should happen. And blah, blah, this should happen. It's like, nope, that is not productive conversation.
Yeah.
That is a battle not worth fighting. Because it's not really a battle. It's an imaginary battle.
Right. So the little note that I had written down here, in this I called it being informed, right? So when I write you down on my phone, something has happened that has made me feel some type of way. And so this is great, right? Because this was written down in a time where I made the decision that it was a battle of ideological importance and not of strategic importance, Whatever I heard that made me feel this way, correcting it is not going to change anything. All it's going to do is cause me more frustration because it's going to cause a problem between me and this person that I tried to correct, right?
Yes.
So take that with a grain of salt take this with a grain of salt while I'm reading it, that I did write this down while I was probably frustrated about something. So,
carry on.
One side effect of being informed is being angry about most things.
Yes.
Being informed won't rid the anger, but it will at least provide understanding. Choosing to not be informed sets you in a motion of forever being uninformed and spreading misinformation. I can't stand for people to say things that aren't true simply because they choose not to find out if they're correct. I can't understand being okay just not knowing something and saying things that aren't true.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's one of the things that gets me a lot, is hearing people say something that isn't true, and you have to decide and weigh whether or not it's worth it to be like, well, actually, this is really the reality of this, because some things for that person, it's a battle of ideological importance, and while you may think that it's strategic, it's not going to be the same thing for them, know. You're going to just try and provide information that's going to challenge an ideology of theirs, something that they hold could challenge an ideology of theirs, something they hold very true, that it's just going to cause a whole fucking whirlwind of shit that you don't need in your life. It's not worth it. It's not worth it to possibly jeopardize your relationship with that person over just a fact, over something and that's where a lot of people, especially with this last election, I think separated from their families that voted for Trump when they didn't. That they weren't able to separate whatever is inside of them that led them that way, that led you the other way. That doesn't matter. Like at the end, you guys are still family. You know, so then this ideological difference between you, like, does that matter enough for you to not talk at all?
Nope.
It's not worth it. At the end of the day, it's not worth it.
No, because if you operate on that level, you have essentially a brewing civil war.
Yeah.
And that's not healthy for anybody.
An ideology is not truth. It's meaning. You know, its ideology is not a truth. That's just, it's an ideal. It's
right like a personal truth.
Yeah, it's an ideal. It's something that you hold for yourself.
Yep.
You know, so to try and battle someone on their ideology does not make any sense. That's like trying to tell a devout Christian that God doesn't exist. You know, it doesn't make any sense. It's not going to work. It doesn't matter
unless you're coming at it from an even intellectual playing field, where you know that you're in a debate of ideas and that both sides are willing to give ground at, you know, factual evidence that should be persuasive one way or the other. If you have evidence to back it up, you have to be able to change your mind. And I think that's the difference in, say, like the members of the IDW and, you know, kind of just the more, I don't know how you want to, aggressive activist type commentators and stuff like that, you know, like the old Cenk Uygur, whatever his name is, of the, God, what the hell's their fucking thing?
The Young Turks.
Young Turks, yeah. You know, he's been lambasted by Ben Shapiro in a number of debates. And it doesn't matter to him because he solely plays on the ideological side of things.
Yeah.
You know, he will never change his mind because he is not somebody that's willing to change his mind about things that he already made his decision on. And that's, you know, Ben Shapiro will get up there and do it because it's part of Politicon and that's just the docket for the day. But at the end of the day, that battle is meaningless to him. That's not a worthwhile battle. He's going to do it because he likes to debate and it's part of Politicon and whatever. He'll do it. But,
right.
You know, in the grand scheme of things, that's not a debate that's meaningful. It's just entertainment at that point for political nerds like us. But there was another point that you had made in there that I thought was really interesting. And this was talking about, and you had alluded to it earlier, about kind of being comfortable in a job, but kind of lying to yourself that this is where I'm okay with being for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Because this is better than I've ever done. You know, I got a steady job for the first time. I'm treated well. I'm paid okay. You know, I'm taken care of. I don't hate everyone I work with. I like the trade that I'm in. I have a valuable skill. I'm helping people. I mean, you check all of these boxes. And I think it's important to note that the reason why this struck me is because this is exactly why I left.
Yeah.
Because, and I don't know if this is a personality issue that I have, but I have had a problem since I left the military of not being satisfied with wherever I land.
Yeah.
With no matter how good or bad the job is, I'm always looking to the other side of the fence and seeing the grass is greener and going, I should be over there. I could be over there. Life will be better over there. You know, and it's not just an ideologic argument. I mean, it's usually if I do that, there's good logical reasons to shift.
Right.
But like you said, you talked about if you were in a point where, and I think you were alluding to the podcast.
Yeah.
If we were able to ever make a full-blown living off of this, you would have to make that hard decision to leave your day job.
Right.
And you think about your employers and the time they've spent training you, the money they've paid you and invested in you to make you an asset that now, you know, an asset to the company and probably personally knowing them. I mean, these guys care deeply about each and every one of their employees. Yeah. And that can make things really hard for somebody to move on.
Yeah.
And
well, especially at this job where kind of like when we talked to Dave a couple weeks ago, that it's such a particular skill, you know, that it doesn't really mean anything anywhere else that I go.
Yeah.
You know, like having been here for X amount of time and, you know, not even any type of supervisor experience or anything because we're all pretty much the same level, you know?
Yeah.
But having enough time doing the same thing and being like an engineer type of person, you know, doing small hands type of stuff, like whatever. I mean, that works, but if I tell them, well, I fucking cut neoprene really good with this little wheel thing, then sweet, like that, you're never going to do that ever again. So, and that's something I think about. I don't think that's unique to you, and I wouldn't classify it for myself in the way that I'm thinking about the grass is always greener, you know, but when I got this job, I was 20 years old.
Yep.
You know, and so I was presented with an opportunity that's like totally legitimate, that if I want to, I can work here for the rest of my life or the rest of the life of this company, you know, whichever comes first. And that would be totally fine. Like that would be absolutely acceptable, you know, but it's really hard as a 23-year-old and as a 20-year-old and as a whatever to think about having one job for the next 45 fucking years.
It's the classic American standard.
That's like, I'm like, well, that's cool because it's job security, you know, and that's what people are looking for. I don't have to worry about my job. I know it's going to be here. I know I'm going to be able to do whatever. But do I want to do the same thing? Am I going to want to do the same thing in 30 years? Yeah. Like, am I going to hold the same values in 30 years that I do now? You know?
Probably not.
Probably not. I don't hold the same values now that I did 5 years ago, you know, or 10 years ago. So there's no reason for me to think that I would now or that I would then. So, like I said, it has nothing to do with my employers themselves, you know, because I love this job. I fucking love this job. It's awesome, you know, especially when the homeboy's not going to be there. It's an even better job. So it's like the best job I could ask for. But when I come across something, you know, I have to keep myself open enough that something like the podcast can come along. Yeah. You know, because if I kept myself closed, I'm like, no, they invested in me, so I'm investing in them. This is it forever. Yeah. You know, we wouldn't be doing this right now. You know, I would be okay with hanging out with you and drinking beers and smoking weed and talking, you know, but I don't want to record it because it's not going to do whatever. I want to do that because I got my job here. I'm set up over here.
If there's no ends to justify the means.
Right. And it's not because, like I said, I don't think that I am set up here, but I feel fucking great doing this. Yeah. Like, this is awesome. You know,
the high point of my week every week.
If I could do this every fucking day, you know, it's the way I think about this is when I'm talking to somebody face to face, you know, when you and I are talking to each other and maybe I'm talking to you about something that you don't really know that much about, you know, and I'm able to talk for a couple minutes and connect fucking 10 dots for you, you know, that you're like, oh my God, I can't believe that corruption like this is happening in my government and I didn't fucking know about it.
Oh, I can totally believe that now.
The look on people's face when those dots are connected for them, you know. That's it. Like, that's it for me. You know now. You know, that's all I can think is you know now. Now you know. You understand why I was so irate about this. You understand that why for 5 minutes while I've been telling you about this, I've been using my hands and fucking screaming and doing shit. You know, it's because this is crazy. It's crazy that this is happening and you didn't know about it.
Yeah.
You know?
And it's not even, because I think on its surface level, people can think it's almost, how do I put this? Shallow in a way. Like you're just trying to prove that you're right. But that's not the case at all.
That's the thing, is it's about you, not about me. I'm happy that I could do that for you.
Yes.
It's not about me having the information. It's about you not having it, and you should have it.
And you said that in your blog post. That's kind of what drove us to do this. It's because if we didn't care about actually helping people connect those dots and bridge that gap between information and people, like you said, we'd probably be sitting at a bar right now doing this.
Yes.
And just me and you sitting at the bar. And that would be it. And our conversation would be dead. But I think both of us recognize that in today's world, it behooves us to have a decent conversation on a level that certain people can digest that, you know, especially like in the IDW world, you know, when Eric Weinstein and Dave Rubin sit down and have a conversation, or we'll even bump it up a notch, Eric Weinstein and Ben Shapiro have a conversation. Most people, I would imagine, that might listen to this podcast are not going to be interested in listening to that conversation. Yeah. And they may not be able to take away a lot of things. I mean, you know, every time Eric gets on to a podcast and talks, and once he starts talking, you know, physics or mathematics or something like that, I got to go back and listen to it at least one more time just to grasp some of the concepts that he's laying out. And we're pretty well versed in that kind of stuff because we listen to it all the time.
Yeah.
But, it's important for the culture war and that marketplace of ideas to take place on a level that everyone can digest. And I think what we do offers that at a level that normal people, the everyday working man and women that don't have time to invest 40 plus hours in research every week to actually be able to comprehend, and we can deliver some of that. And like you said, if we can connect the dots for one person, and open their mind into the truth of a situation, and get them on a path that they can actually start making more informed opinions on, one person is enough.
Right.
That's all I want. I just want one person. And if you are one of those people that do listen to this podcast and it has been beneficial, tell your friends about it.
Let us know. Let us know. I want to know, that anything. That's what I got people that tell me all the time. They're like, oh, I just wish that I was there so I could have said something. That's what the Facebook is for. That's what Twitter's for. That's what Instagram is for. Tell me that shit. I want to know.
That's what social media was invented for.
Any of that.
Exactly.
If you come to a point where you're having some type of thought about what we're saying, tell me that. Tell me that. Put it on the internet and tell me that. And if it's too private, send me a message. You don't have to. You don't have to post it. It doesn't have to be public. Send me a message. That's fine. You know what I'm saying? If
you want to be a part of any of our conversations whatsoever, but aren't ready to essentially put yourself on mic and talk about it and expose it to the world, we can have those conversations privately.
I would love
easily.
Love to.
We love to do that. That's why we do this.
If you want links, anything at all, just tell us.
Hit us up.
Yeah. Let us do that for you.
Salt to the streets everywhere.
Everywhere. Salt to the streets, everything. You can do messages and stuff on salttothestreets.com. There's like an email link, so you can send us an email to salttothestreets email.
Absolutely.
Anything at all. You can put little comments on there, like I said, messages on Twitter or Instagram, whatever. You can do that.
It's real easy, man.
Would love for you to do that.
If somebody can tweet out at Elon Musk about their brand new Tesla and how awesome it is, and he gets back to them, we can get back to you, baby.
I talked to a sex bot this week. I'll talk to anybody.
Exactly. That was the greatest.
I talked to a sex bot this week. I wasn't sure it was a sex bot or not until a couple messages in it, and then I was pretty sure.
Yeah, it was funny how it devolved. It was like, oh, I know what this is.
Yeah.
Got it.
And I wasn't sure at first, and so I was like, well, I'm going to keep this open so if it's a real person, I can still be genuine about it.
Exactly. See, even if you're a sex bot, you'll at least get a few back and forth with us.
At least a couple. So it's worth it. Reach out.
Exactly. So for more on that, please go to salttothestreets.com.
Everything is on there.
Click that media tab. You'll see everything there. The blog will be probably not at the top by the time you hear this, but it'll be the second one on the below it probably. Read the blog post for yourself. Get involved in the conversation. If you got a story about, telling yourself a lie, convincing yourself that something's right or wrong or whatever, tell us what it is.
Yeah, tell me that.
We would love to hear stuff like that.
I would love that. That would be sick.
And I think with that, we should jump into the old grab bag skis.
Yeah, so I got something on the grab bag. So today I told you I was listening to the motherfucking Carpool Karaoke's. James Gunn is the show host that does that. And he is from the UK. He's English. And so Paul McCartney.
Which late night show does he host, by the way?
He took over. He has the Late Show, I think. Not Jimmy Fallon. Not Jimmy Kimmel.
Who took over for Jay?
I think that is Jimmy Kimmel.
Okay. And then whoever took over for Conan, that is...
I think that is...
What's his name? The guy I hate.
Because Colbert took over for fucking Dave what's his face. Anyway.
Either way.
So James Gunn is one of these late night show hosts, right? I think it's the Tonight Show, maybe with James. I'll look it up real quick. James Gunn.
We have the technology. Sometimes I forget that we do have the technology.
Oh, that's also not his name.
Oh, yeah. James Gunn is the director of Guardians of the Galaxy, right?
Yeah.
He's the one that got in some deep trouble lately.
Yeah. What the fuck
in
is
the
this
social
guy's
justice warrior name?
James Corden.
James Corden.
James Corden. So sorry about that. It's the Late Show.
The Late Show.
I think that he took over for Craig Robinson.
Oh,
Ferguson.
That sounds made up.
Craig Ferguson.
I can't keep track of all those late night shows anyways.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure it's Craig Ferguson that he took over.
On a good night, I'm asleep for like 3 hours before those come on.
So James Corbin's, he's pretty good, right? Mm-hmm. He played a game on like one of his first shows where they played hide and seek in someone else's house. Like they knocked on people's doors and were just like, hey, do you guys want to play hide and seek with us? And so he had a bunch of people just hide in their house. And like you had to go and find people in your own house, so that was pretty funny.
Wow.
So anyway, he does a reoccurring thing that's called carpool karaoke. Mm-hmm. Right? Have you seen these before?
Philly D drops them on there a lot.
He has famous people, and he drives around in a car, and they sing their music and other people's music and like whatever, right? And so I watched one with Paul McCartney on it, right? And so they're both English, and so they're in Liverpool, and they're driving around and they're doing all the whatevers. And God damn it, I'm glad that you're here to hear this. So he's driving around with Paul McCartney, right? And they're listening to all this old Beatles music, and he's singing and they're doing shit. And so Paul McCartney starts to talk about when he wrote "Let It Be," right? He says, "I had a dream."
Let it be, let it be.
Yeah. He says, "I had a dream in the '60s, right? I woke up, or I had a dream, and my mother, who had passed, was telling me, just let it be. She's like, just let it be. Like, don't worry about it. Just like move along. He said at the time I was really worried about our music and us as a group and like how long we were going to exist, and just kind of things about my life. And he said,
just let it be, man.
So and then I woke up, then I was kind of thinking about the dream and everything, and then I remembered like, oh, well, what was that she said? He said, oh, let it be, And he's like, and that was kind of a weird thing, no one had really said that before, and so they were talking about that, and so that's how that
song came.
The first line of the song is like,
that's
Mother
cool.
Mary says to me, singing words of wisdom, let it be, right? So James Corden is like, he's like, well, that's funny because my grandpa and my dad were both musicians, and I remember vividly being a kid, right, sitting down, because my dad and my grandpa had called me into the room, and they were like, so sit down because we're going to play you the best song that you have ever heard. Right, and he said, and they played this song, and because they sang it together, and James Corden started to cry, he got emotional. He says, "I had no idea that was going to happen. Like I had no idea. Like listen to a song all the time never happens. So he tells me, so I, this is how I got exposed to the song, and my grandpa and my dad both said, this is the best song you're ever going to hear. And so he says to Paul McCartney, he's like, it's like, and if my grandpa was here right now, like he would just get the biggest kick out of this, if he could see this. And Paul McCartney looks over and he says, he can.
He can.
He is.
Oh, that's powerful.
And I have tears right now, dog, because I was like, I can't tell Jordan about this. Like, I have to wait until the podcast because that is so fucking sweet. So genuine.
That's powerful.
Paul McCartney has met so many thousands of people.
Oh, yeah.
But it's like Jordan Peterson was talking about when he was on Joe Rogan, that he wants every interaction with people to be genuine or else he doesn't want to be doing it anymore, And it's just such a genuine moment between those two guys. I thought that was so fucking cool.
That is pretty cool.
I thought that was so fucking cool.
I like that.
Yeah.
One of these days, I actually have to sit down and watch a couple episodes
They're
of
like
that.
10-15 minutes that are like really...
Oh, just short?
Short, yeah, because it's a segment on the show. And so
perfect.
You can watch a full 15-minute video on YouTube, and he does 3 minutes of it on the show itself.
That's like Jimmy Kimmel's mean tweets.
Exactly.
I don't watch the show, but I YouTube those when they come out because they're hilarious.
Yep, it's just like that. Yeah.
I watched this hilarious YouTube video Carolina stumbled upon. I think it was on the Bon Appetit channel, which is kind of a fun cooking show type channel. And they had this these segments called Back to Back Chef, I think. And we watched this episode where Gordon Ramsay is there, and then there's a regular dude. And Gordon Ramsay they're standing back to back to each other, and the cameras are facing each one of them. Mm-hmm. And Gordon has to verbally explain how to prep this meal, cook it, plate it, and serve it. And at the end, they turn around and show each other.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
This isn't him being kind of his normal, hardcore character and stuff like that. It's still, Gordon Ramsay is, when you see him on the show, screaming at people and cursing them out and all that, that's real life Gordon Ramsay in the kitchen because that's, in a top class kitchen, that's the way things are and that's the way things have to be. I mean, It's a very militaristic thing. And that's very commonplace for people to do that. He just does it really, really well, and it makes for really, really good television. And so he's kind of, doing it light because it's not something that really matters. But, oh my God, it was hilarious, man. It was like 10, 15 minutes of pure entertainment gold. The guy, he was trying to make these crab cakes, and he fell behind, and he ended up making like this giant stir fry with huge chunks of peppers and big old chunks of crab that I'm pretty sure still had like shell pieces in them and stuff like that.
No.
And then essentially just dumping it over a bed of chopped romaine lettuce with this kind of aioli mayonnaise type dressing thing that's supposed to be for the crab cake. But he put it on the salad, and then he just topped the crab meat and stuff on the salad. It was hilarious. Oh, but there was another episode that we started to watch that had Natalie Portman with it.
Yeah.
But it was like a vegan chef, because Natalie Portman's 100% vegan.
Yeah.
And we got about halfway through it. I was like, well, this is actually really boring.
Yeah.
Gordon Ramsay made the last episode for sure.
Yeah.
But I did have a little grab bag stuff from France. Have you heard about any of the protests? Yeah, the fuel tax fueled protests that have turned into 2 to 3 weeks of hardcore protests and violence and building damage and all this good stuff.
Yeah, we were actually just talking about that yesterday. That's really funny. They tried to implement a new fuel tax in France, and there was enough people that
directly affected it. Yeah, I mean,
and protested it for long enough that they backed away from the taxes, and somebody from the cabinet got fired or quit or something.
Oh, I'm sure.
Last week.
Yeah, it was interesting because Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, and along with the prime minister, I can't remember his name. He's kind of like essentially the number 2-ish. The way their system works is very different than ours. But this. I think there's been a lot of reporting that I think is disingenuous about this, because a lot of this has been focused on that gas tax, particularly tied to the Paris Climate Accords and the, essentially looking at the carbon taxes and stuff like that. And I think that's disingenuous because once you start to look into the story, you realize that a lot of the revenue from these gas taxes and stuff like that are disproportionately affecting people of the middle and lower class in France who are all super, super pissed about this.
Right.
Including the latest group was the ambulance drivers union that's went on strike, which is not a good thing considering violent protests.
Right.
But a lot of the tax revenue from this stuff just goes into like the general fund for government spending. And it doesn't necessarily go to a portion of it does go to whatever climate control stuff they have, but not most of it. And I just thought that was a really interesting piece. It's been absolutely insane. The Arc de Triomphe, or whatever you call it, that sits in the center of the Champs-Élysées, which is like a big, picturesque, giant-ass roundabout in Paris, which, from firsthand experience, is an insane place to try to be, because there are like 6 or 8 lanes of traffic around this giant fucking roundabout that goes around the arch.
Yeah, fuck that.
It's absolutely insane. But that place is it's been shut down. There's been massive graffiti on the arc. I mean, storefronts have been damaged. Cars been flipped, burned, and apparently they even broke into the gift shop at the Louvre, the giant museum in Paris and all that. It's where the Mona Lisa and stuff is. But yeah, like you said, the administration acquiesced to the protesters, and they said that there will be no more, to try to quell its most serious political crisis. The government of President Emmanuel Macron announced on Tuesday that it would suspend the gas tax increase that had set off the 3 weeks of increasingly violent protests in Paris and around France by the so-called Yellow Vest movement.
Yeah.
And so starting January 1st, there will be no more increases to the gas tax, because it would have continued to climb over the years.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And so that's something I don't know. That's not in the grand scheme of realpolitik, That is not a good thing for governmental control of France.
Yeah.
Because essentially you're bowing to protest. And, whether it's justified or not, it's not necessarily a good thing, I don't think. It shows weakness. And, he's already incredibly unpopular in France nowadays, and that is certainly not helping.
Macron is unpopular in France?
Yeah, very high. He's highly unpopular now.
Don't like the gays over there in France? Is that what it's called?
Well, he kind of...
Is Macron gay? Am I making that up?
No, he's not gay.
No?
No, he's...
I don't think he was gay.
Maybe because his marital situation is very different. You've seen pictures of the man.
Yeah.
He's not a bad-looking dude.
Yeah.
He is married to a woman like twice his age, and that looks kind of like Nancy Pelosi.
Why did I think that Emmanuel Macron was gay?
Because you might be thinking about Justin Trudeau, but that's okay.
Is Justin Trudeau gay?
No, I don't think so either.
Why the fuck do I think he's gay?
Is he? He's...
All right.
We're looking for the audience. Phone a friend here. I don't think that he's gay. I don't know. I don't know.
There was someone voted into one of the foreign positions like in the last year or so. That was the first openly gay.
Well, we just got someone in the United States who's the first openly gay representative.
No.
That
foreign.
just happened.
Yeah, this is foreign. I feel like I remember that too, and I don't remember who it is. Either way, we'll figure it out. But no, Emmanuel Macron is not technically gay. I don't know if he is. Maybe he's in the closet, but he's married to a woman. But yeah, he came into office kind of as an outsider in a way. He beat out Marine Le Pen. You remember that?
Yes.
During the election from the far right group. And but he was kind of, for France, I would say he was probably a little center right for France, which on our political scale is pretty far left still. But a lot of his policies have not gone over well, as you can see. People are rioting out in the streets in Paris, so it's not a good sign. But yeah, that's basically it. I like to stay current on some of these big worldly political events as well. There was another little political grab baggy thing that I had come up. You remember last week we talked about James Comey being subpoenaed by the Senate, the House, to go in and have that closed door meeting about the handling of the email investigation into Hillary Clinton and all that. Loretta Lynch was supposed to go in. Well, the transcript for that hearing came out this week, and it's 200 some pages long, and I've started reading it.
Of course you did.
Yeah, I know, it's disgusting. And I don't know why, because like I said, there's no real ends to this situation. But I was perplexed at the fact that no matter how hard I searched, I couldn't find a single thing referencing Loretta Lynch's appearance in front of her hearing.
Yeah.
So I don't even know if she had it. We haven't heard anything from her side. All we've heard is from the Comey side. And I think it's incredibly interesting that I haven't heard a single thing about it. I was looking again this morning to try to find some kind of article about it. Nothing. Nobody even mentions her.
Weird.
Except for when the subpoenas first came out for them. But other than that was it. 'Cause she was supposed to be the day after Comey. So I don't know what happened with that.
As far as we know, it did happen. There just isn't any report on it.
I'm only assuming it happened because she was subpoenaed to appear the day after James Comey was.
That's weird.
But I don't know if it did happen or not. She might be, her legal team might be fighting it in court, like Comey said he was going to do, but then essentially acquiesced. They probably offered him the public transcript, and he thought that was good enough. But I'm guessing there. But what else do you got in your grab bag, homie?
Only like one other thing from a couple weeks ago that I wrote down, that when Jim Acosta was getting all uppity in that
lost his press pass.
Yeah. The only other thing that I have written down about that is that when the White House was talking about that, they said that there needed to be decorum in the White House. And I thought that was like maybe one of the biggest fucking jokes I ever heard in my whole life coming from the administration.
I don't disagree with it, but it is absolutely hysterical coming out of the White House's mouth. You know what I mean?
Because I absolutely agree there should be decorum in the White House. But
Yeah.
anybody-
Including press briefings. I think if they devolve into what today's press briefings are, they're completely useless for the most part.
Yeah.
And it just turns into a train wreck. And I think there should be rules about how, decorum should be in those things, maybe time limits, and everybody literally just gets one question. Maybe, everybody gets two questions, so you can always ask follow-up or something. But, there needs to be some kind of rules, man, because that stuff gets out of hand so quick. And it literally turns into, most of the time, the press versus the president and the president versus the press. And it's never a fun thing to watch. It's a slow-motion train wreck, and I don't like it. I do like it.
I do like it.
I do like it. I'm sick and twisted like that. What can I say? There was something else that did come out of the G20 last week.
Yes.
Last weekend. The President Trump and the President of China, Xi Jinping, they did have a little dinner talk about the tariff situation and the trade wars.
Yes.
And apparently they have come to an agreement to stop further tariffs after January 1st this year as talks continue to develop for these trade deals. China has agreed to purchase some more agricultural equipment and goods from us to help balance the trade deficit that we have with them and so on and so forth. But I think this is a perfect example. I think if you really look at Trump's trade wars and his love of the tariff and being able to utilize tariffs, and I think this is all chickens coming home to roost on the tariff wars, realizing that you can't get into a tariff trade war and everybody's okay. Tariffs affect everybody negatively on both sides, but I think mostly tariffs, they hurt the people you're trying to help in this situation. You're trying to help, say, like the steel industry, right? But if you just pass a further tax on to the nation that's buying your steel, they're going to pass that off to their their buyers, and it always trickles down to the actual consumer. And we talked about it back when the trade war first started to kick off, but this obsession with trade deficits is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
There's, we've said it before, and I think, people say it all the time. Why's my boss calling me? Well, we'll talk in a minute.
We're almost done, man.
The concept of having a trade deficit with a nation isn't a bad thing.
No.
There's no reason why, just because let's say they buy $100 worth of stuff from you, that you have to turn around and buy $100 stuff from them. There's no reason to do that whatsoever. You're going to buy from the best supplier from around the world in a free market. That, due to the nature of things, can cause trade deficits from one nation to another. And that's totally fine as long as you still, at the end of the day, balance your checkbook out and are making out.
Right.
If you're not, that's a totally different situation. But tariffs is not a way to do that. And I'm glad to see that it sounds like there's a little progress in ending this stupid trade war.
Yeah, we'll see.
So we'll see.
I'll fucking believe it when I see it.
Yeah.
I don't trust dick coming out of there when it comes to trade.
Yeah, exactly. A la carte deals all the time.
Yeah.
But that's about it for me and my grab bag, I guess.
You want to move on to sports real quick?
Sports!
All right, sports. So Mike McCarthy fired as the Packers head coach last week.
I saw that.
Yep. Getting fired out here. Got a couple of
Bye, Felicia.
Couple of Super Bowl rings. Got some shit. But out of there. Brandon Browner. We talked about this weeks ago. Brandon Browner got sentenced to 8 years in prison for attempted murder. He was a corner on the Seahawks the year they won the Super Bowl. And then the next year when the Pats won, he's got 2 rings. Going to jail for 8 fucking years. The Bills, they waived wide receiver Kelvin Benjamin, and he was subsequently picked up by the Chiefs and signed to a 1-year deal. The Redskins are signing QB Josh Johnson as a backup to Mark Sanchez, so that's who the fuck Josh Johnson is, because I asked that earlier. So there's that. The Raiders signed C.J. Anderson, which is really weird because he's ass. The Broncos claimed wide receiver Andre Holmes off of waivers from the Bills. Derrick Henry, did you watch the game on Thursday?
No, man.
You should watch that shit. Derrick Henry is the second person ever behind Tony Dorsett in 1983 to have a 99-yard rushing touchdown It was fucking absurd.
That's beautiful.
He also had 4 touchdowns on the day and over 200 yards. He said the Tennessee Titans matched the touchdown rushing record, but set a new record.
Pause button.
Yes.
99 rushing touchdown.
99 yards.
Yeah, so does that mean like this isn't like a punt return or a kickoff return? So this is you're at the 1 yard line.
Yeah, so the punt got put down at the 1 yard line. So
the next play.
Yep, so they started at the 1. And so he was in the end zone and ran out of the end zone 99 yards.
Good Lord.
It was fucking crazy.
That's insanity.
Yeah, you should look that shit up. And
That's almost on the level of Dolphins messing with the Pats today.
Yes. And
that's pretty powerful.
He broke like 4 or 5 tackles on the way down there. Like, it's not like he wasn't touched. Like, there was defenders down there.
Stiff arms, left and right.
They compared it to, do you remember the Beastquake run? Remember when Beast Mode went the fuck off, the Beastquake? You know what I'm talking about?
I think so.
Okay. Well, we'll watch the Beastquake run after this because that's something that everyone should.
I feel like the first 2 seasons Lynch was there, his whole career was nothing but Beachquake runs.
Yeah. No, it's this one particular run against the New Orleans Saints where he breaks like fucking 9 tackles on the way down there.
Of course he does.
It's just some of the craziest shit anybody's ever seen.
That's why we call him Beast Mode.
Yeah, so they're calling it Beastquake 2.0.
Nice,
because it was fucking crazy. And then today, Tom Brady, he passed Peyton Manning for the most passing touchdowns ever. Last week, during the Washington game, Colt McCoy broke his fucking leg, and he had to go out. And then Mark Sanchez came back in, and he hadn't played ball since 2016. Colt McCoy broke his right fibula.
Ow.
Yeah.
Fibula's the big one? No.
That's one of the smaller ones.
The smaller ones back there.
Broke his fibula. It was a horrible thing. So
not as bad as Alex Smith's rubber leg.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that was so gnarly.
Same team, though, which is the weird thing.
Yeah.
And then in that same game, no, not the same game as Derrick Henry. The week before, Adrian Peterson broke off a fucking 90-yard touchdown piece, and it was crazy. He also ended the game with 98 rushing yards. Isn't that fucking weird? He had one 90-yard run, and then 8 more yards after that.
That's tough,
I thought
man.
That was really strange.
That is so tough to just get out there, kick ass, get 90 yards, then just pick up slowly 8 yards through the rest of the game.
Yeah, I thought it was super weird. Greg Olsen, he's done for the season. He ruptured his patella fascia, which is something in his foot, I'm pretty sure.
In your patella, your knee?
Yeah, but it's something else.
Okay.
Because he had a problem with his foot. And
I don't know, man. I'm not a doctor.
Yeah, I know it does. Your patella is your knee, but I don't know what the deal is with that.
Either way, not a good thing to hurt when you're an athlete.
Yeah, so Broncos corner Chris Harris, broken fibula. He's fucking done. AJ Green went on IR because of his foot. Christian Kirk got placed on IR. He's a wide receiver for the. Here it is.
There it is. Boom.
Here's the Beastquake.
Just going right through. Just going right through.
So fuck you.
Good Lord, man.
Fuck you.
He just tosses that guy. Dude, he tossed that dude like 10 yards almost.
Yep.
And there it is.
Beastquake.
Oh.
So that's the Beastquake run.
Yeah, it is.
So the Derrick Henry one was very similar to that.
That dude's insane.
There it is. It's the very first thing.
Is he going to play another season next year for Oklahoma? Or Oakland?
I don't know, but I guess we will see. So, James Conner, he's a running back. He's the backup to Le'Veon Bell, who's been banging all year. This is the 99-yard touchdown piece. It was fucking crazy.
This is look at this.
On the one. Right?
Good night. And stiff arm. You're just out to lunch. Goodbye. I'm just going to throw you down. I'm going to throw you down because my blocker can't block. And boom.
Isn't that fucking crazy?
And then 8 more yards the rest of the day. Oh, no.
That was Adrian Peterson. Yeah. No, he went the fuck off this game.
That's nuts, man.
Derrick Henry had 4 teeters and like 250 yards. That was the weird thing. Yeah. And it was against the Jags, too.
Yeah.
Jags have a fucking great defense, but he just destroyed them.
Bye.
Yeah, it was
just gone, man. I love it.
So James Conner was out this week with a leg injury. Emmanuel Sanders tore his Achilles in practice last week. The Giants safety Landon Collins is on IR with a shoulder injury. And Odell was out this week. Odell Beckham for the Giants. And that is all I have as far as sports news. So we can hit a line and get the fuck out of here if you want.
Boom skis.
Okay. I want to talk about Eater next week, which is a fucking robot that runs off of biological material.
No. Yes, I heard about this.
So we're going to talk about that next week.
Oh, God, I'm terrified.
Yes. So let's see. Do you have anything else that you want to add on to this, or you think you're ready to get out of here?
It could eat people and use it for fuel, man.
Did you hear that, babe? A robot that consumes biological material as fuel. So theoretically, a robot that could eat people as fuel.
No thanks. Humans are abundant.
So we're going to talk about that next week in the grab bag.
Let's do it.
Okay. You ready?
Yeah, man.
All right. Well, shit. Let me tell you a little lesson, buddy. Cream always rises to the top. And I'm about to show you the white hot cream of an 8th grade boy.
Oh, my God. Oh, Jesus.